If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 41, Fine. 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 This. Veer stared at the description of the ability. To be honest, it didn't seem all that useful. Steel? In the later stages, that would just be a toy. Something that would shatter upon impact. The real problem was the word temporary. Who knew how short the duration actually was? He'd have to find an opportunity to test it out. But the upper limit of this ability was clearly low. It was only usable in the current situation. On the other side, Chopper had nearly finished patching up Zoro. Big bro. All done. Seeing Chopper's serious expression, Veer nodded in satisfaction. How are you feeling, Zoro? Still able to move? Veer reached out a hand toward Zoro, smiling as he asked. Zoro didn't respond with words. He just smirked and placed his hand on Veer's. Atop the palace walls, a battle was raging. Luffy was panting heavily, his face covered in bloodstains. Crocodile, on the other hand, looked even worse. That slicked back hair of his was now a complete mess. His cigar had long since disappeared. His once luxurious coat was now covered in dirt and grime. And his face? It was twisted with pure rage. The guy in front of him was like a damn monkey. It was infuriatingly hard to land a hit on him. The more they fought, the angrier Crocodile became. He was already at the point where he wanted to tear Luffy apart with his own hands. At that moment, a motorbike slowly came to a stop below the palace walls. Veer looked up at the towering walls, feeling a bit helpless. He didn't know how to use Jeppo, Moonwalk. There was no way up. Earlier, he had run into Nami and the others. They were on their way to deal with the massive bomb Crocodile had planted. So, Veer had Chopper and Zoro go with them. Before they left, he told Chopper to keep an eye on the clock tower. Then, he made his way here alone. But now, he had no way up. Just as he was at a loss. Gaga! A strange bird-like creature, resembling an ostrich, appeared in front of him. Above, Luffy and Crocodile had clashed once more. It was clear that Crocodile was truly furious now. He had lost all interest in toying with Luffy. His attacks had become ruthlessly lethal, every move aimed to end Luffy's life. Ground Secco. Crocodile suddenly slammed his hand onto the ground. The once lush, green palace was instantly engulfed by an aura of destruction. Plants withered. The earth cracked apart. The ground beneath Luffy's feet split open into a massive chasm. If not for his ability to stretch freely, he would have fallen in for sure. Seeing this, Crocodile attacked again. This time, everything around them began turning into sand at a rapid pace. The ground, buildings, statues. All of it crumbled into fine grains of sand. And the devastation was sweeping toward Luffy. Luffy tumbled out of the way, barely avoiding the attack, but he ended up dangling from the edge of the palace wall. Just as he was about to climb up, a hand appeared out of nowhere. It gripped Luffy by the throat. You damn fly, you're annoying as hell. Die. Crocodile's golden hook swung straight toward Luffy's head. Unlike before, he wasn't trying to drain Luffy dry. This time, he was going for the kill. This was because Veer had restored Luffy to peak condition earlier, making the fight far more troublesome for Crocodile. The deadly golden hook slashed downward. Luffy struggled violently. But the hand gripping him was impossibly strong. He couldn't break free. At that critical moment, a jet black stone hurtled toward them. Just as the hook was about to pierce Luffy's skull, it struck. With a sharp clang, Crocodile's hand wavered involuntarily. The hook veered off course and slashed straight through Luffy's right arm. A flash of steel. A complete, severed limb flew into the air. At the same time, a foot clad in haki-covered blackness appeared in front of Crocodile. Before he could react, the kick smashed into his face. Crocodile was sent flying, disappearing from Veer's sight in an instant. The sheer impact cracked the palace wall beneath his feet. Crocodile's grip loosened, and Luffy, stunned, watched his severed arm fall away. He plummeted downward. Using the recoil from his kick, Veer grabbed Luffy's detached arm first. Then, with a powerful push off the wall, he chased after the falling Luffy. Seeing Luffy's dazed expression, Veer hesitated. Originally, he had planned to let Luffy break his fall. But now, he just couldn't bring himself to do it. With a thunderous crash, they landed. Dust billowed up in all directions. A massive crater formed beneath them. Veer looked at the dazed Luffy in his arms, then promptly smacked him twice. Luffy slowly turned his head to face Veer. His eyes welled up with tears. His fists were his only means of fighting, and now he had lost one. This was a devastating blow. Veer, my hand. Luffy's voice trembled, on the verge of tears. Stop crying. It can be fixed. It can be reattached. Veer, annoyed, snapped back at him. As he spoke, he pulled out a preservation device from his medical kit. It was a small, box-like container that preserved anything stored inside in its original state. Similar to a refrigerator. Hearing this, Luffy's sorrowful expression froze. Then, realization dawned on him. With his remaining arm, he immediately wrapped Veer in a tight hug. For real, Veer? That's amazing. I thought I was gonna be stuck with just one hand forever. You're incredible, Veer. You can even reattach a severed hand. You're the best doctor in the world. Feeling the strength of Luffy's embrace strong enough to choke out two elephants, Veer retaliated with a punch to Luffy's head. Are you trying to strangle me? Luffy sheepishly released him. But before he could react, Veer shoved him onto the ground. Don't move. Let's bandage the wound first. We'll reattach it later. You stay here. I'll handle Crocodile. Veer's tone was calm. But beneath that calmness, something else lurked. He had planned to let Luffy grow through experience. But now, that damn crocodile had hurt Luffy this badly. If Veer had been even a second later, Luffy would have died. Fine. 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 Veer pulled out his specially crafted hemostatic powder and sprinkled it onto Luffy's severed arm. The bleeding stopped quickly. He wrapped the wound with bandages, packed up his tools, and stood up. Luffy remained silent. He knew that, with one arm gone, he stood no chance against Crocodile. Veer taking over was the best outcome. Veer, please, don't let Vivi's country fall. Luffy's voice was solemn. Veer said nothing. He tossed the preservation device into Luffy's lap and turned toward the secret room where the poneglyph was kept. Luffy clutched his severed arm, watching Veer leave. For the first time, the ever-kind Veer had shown a truly dark expression. Chapter 42, I didn't say you could leave. The 100-meter-high city wall was still beyond Veer's ability to climb. That duck from earlier had also fainted from the fall. Veer was certain that Crocodile had taken a serious hit. His kick had landed squarely on Crocodile's face. There was no doubt Crocodile had felt the threat from him. That meant he definitely wouldn't be chasing after him. Finding Pluton was Crocodile's top priority now. Since Veer couldn't climb the wall, the only way to find Crocodile was to wait for him in the underground chamber. Not far from the palace, Robin was leading the king toward the chamber's entrance. They had set off before Veer appeared, so they hadn't gotten far yet. Robin frowned slightly as she looked at the marines blocking their way. This little marine girl had no idea what she was up against. Robin glanced at Tashigi, who was standing in their way, and didn't bother wasting words. She activated the power of the Hana Hana no Mi. In an instant, slender arms sprouted from the bodies of the surrounding marines. A series of cracking sounds followed. Every marine, including Tashigi, lost their ability to fight in an instant. Robin cast a cold glance at the fallen Tashigi before stepping over her. Behind her, the king sighed helplessly and followed along. No one noticed that in a dimly lit alley nearby, an unconscious figure had mysteriously appeared. Under the king's guidance, they soon arrived above the chamber. With a push of the statue before them, a secret passage was revealed. One after another, they stepped inside. After a long walk through the passage, they reached an ancient chamber filled with the weight of history. Various antiques lined the room. But the most eye-catching feature was the massive stone at its center. The moment Robin saw it, a ripple of emotion flickered across her otherwise calm eyes. She quickly stepped forward. Reaching out, she gently touched the ancient stone. "This is the poneglyph you were looking for," the king said with a grim expression. Robin didn't need him to say it, she could tell at a glance. This was exactly what she had been searching for. Just as she prepared to decipher it, a hoarse voice echoed from behind her. "Finally found it! Ha ha ha! Now, let's see who can stop me!" Robin's face immediately darkened. "Translate it for me now. Tell me where Pluton is." Crocodile, eyes manic with excitement, ordered from behind her. He looked utterly wretched. His hair was a mess, and a deep shoe print was imprinted on his face. He was a sorry sight. Robin lifted her gaze to the poneglyph. She was at his mercy. If she disobeyed, she could die at any moment. But after scanning the inscriptions, her expression shifted unpredictably. The text did contain clues about Pluton. But if she told Crocodile... Well... Speak. Crocodile roared, growing impatient with her silence. There's no mention of Pluton here. This only records the history of this kingdom. Robin ultimately chose not to reveal the truth. The moment she spoke, the air around them grew noticeably colder. Crocodile's expression darkened to its limit. His inherently suspicious nature told him that this woman was lying. After everything he had done, was this all he had found? Just the history of some ancient kingdom? What a joke! She had to be lying. At that moment, Crocodile's killing intent toward Robin flared. Pulling out a handkerchief, he wiped his already dirted golden hook. No mention, hey? What a pity! He said flatly. Robin, perceptive as she was, could clearly sense his intent to kill. She knew her chances of survival were slim. She wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. With lightning-fast reflexes, she hurled a bottle of water at Crocodile. Then, drawing a long knife from her coat, she lunged at him. But after being humiliated by Luffy with water, there was no way Crocodile would be unprepared. With a swirl of sand, he intercepted the bottle mid-air. As for Robin's attack, her movements were riddled with openings in his eyes. With a simple flick of his hook, he disarmed Robin's dagger with ease. Then, he clamped his fingers around her throat. The power gap was too vast. Robin couldn't even touch Crocodile. Die, you pathetic little rat. With that, he thrust his golden hook toward her chest. He despised being deceived. Robin could do nothing but struggle desperately. Feeling the crushing force on her throat, she finally closed her eyes in despair. After hiding for so many years, am I finally going to die? Maybe death isn't so bad. I have nothing left to care about. Perhaps this is my true fate. As that thought crossed her mind, a smile formed on her lips. She had suffered too much over the years. She was exhausted. So exhausted. Just as she was about to embrace death, the expected pain never came. Perplexed, she slowly opened her eyes. Before her was a hand. A hand that had caught Crocodile's golden hook mid-thrust. The hand was coated in a pitch-black substance, radiating an overwhelming sense of danger. Following that arm, she saw a tall figure standing beside her. It was an unfamiliar face, one she had never seen before. There was no emotion in his expression, only an eerie calm. But with her years of experience, Robin could sense the fury hidden beneath that calm exterior. Crocodile was even more shocked. He recognized Veer. The guy who had nearly kicked his head off earlier. How was he here? Panic crept into Crocodile's heart. That single kick had already shown him the power gap between them. He wasn't sure he could beat Veer. This guy could even use armament haki so effortlessly. The pressure from Veer's grip alone told him this kid's physical prowess was monstrous. No. He had to find a way to escape. But before he could react, he felt the grip on his hook tighten. His hook was being crushed. The golden hook that had served him for years was turning flat. Its color even began to change, gradually transforming into solid steel. Then crack! With a sharp noise, Crocodile's right hand was left with nothing but a mangled piece of scrap metal. Panic set in. He instantly released Robin and turned into a cloud of sand, trying to flee. But at that moment, everything around them began turning into steel. As if alive, the liquefied steel surged toward the chamber's entrance. In the blink of an eye, a massive steel door slammed shut, sealing off the only exit. In less than a second, an iron fortress had formed. Steel transformation temporarily converts anything touched into steel. Shaping allows the liquefaction of inanimate objects and reshaping them into any form. Crocodile was forced to stop. His expression was now utterly grim. At the same time, a deep voice finally broke the silence. I didn't say you could leave. With a calm yet chilling gaze, Veer looked at Crocodile and spoke in a low, steady tone. Chapter 43, So Strong. Hearing these words, Crocodile immediately realized that things wouldn't end well today. This guy seemed to be with that damned pest. Was he here for revenge? Damn it! Does he really think I'm that easy to bully? On the other side, Robin, who had fallen to the ground, stared blankly at Veer's back. She had never seen this person before. But why did he save me? Trying to run? Is that all a Shishibukai is capable of? Veer spoke again. He had no particular reason for saving Robin. It was just on a whim. This woman had endured far more than she should have. As for her abilities, he'd have plenty of opportunities to acquire them later. For now, saving her was just something he did in passing. But the moment he finished speaking, Crocodile could no longer hold back. With a furious expression, he transformed into a whirlwind of sand and charged towards them. Before he even arrived, a massive sand blade had already slashed through the air. His right hand had also formed a sand blade, compensating for the loss of his golden hook. Two sand blades, one large and one small, struck at Veer from both front and back. Yet, Veer neither dodged nor flinched. Just as the massive sand blade was about to cleave into him, Veer finally moved. He simply raised his right hand and blocked the enormous blade in front of him. In the instant they made contact, the giant sand blade inexplicably transformed into solid steel. Crocodile, who had been charging forward, was completely dumbfounded. What the hell kind of ability was this? He had lost control over the sand blade instantly. After all, it wasn't sand anymore. But even if the sand had turned into steel, the impact should still carry force. However, to his horror, he saw the steel blade suddenly shift in shape. A hole formed in the middle, allowing the attack to completely bypass Veer and Robin. Crocodile was left utterly speechless. What kind of ability combination was this? This was beyond ridiculous. His grip tightened as his frustration grew. There was no way Veer could change something that was already in his hands, right? Robin, too, stared blankly at the massive steel chunk that had landed beside her. She was completely bewildered by Veer's bizarre abilities. Just as Crocodile reached Veer, Veer made his move again. But this time, he wasn't just defending. Crocodile only saw a blur in front of him before Veer suddenly vanished. His eyes widened in shock as a terrible premonition welled up inside him. At the same time, a figure appeared at his side. Leg reinforcement. A low murmur echoed, and the next thing Crocodile felt was like he had been hit by a speeding train. His head snapped sideways as his entire body was sent flying. The powerful shockwave even caused Robin's clothes to flutter violently. For the first time, her eyes reflected true astonishment. This man was incredible. The Shishibukai, whom she had viewed as nearly invincible, was being toyed with in Veer's hands. Crocodile hadn't even been able to react before getting kicked away. Just how strong was this guy? On the other side, Crocodile crashed violently into the poneglyph. Veer had intentionally chosen that direction. Otherwise, Crocodile would have likely blasted a hole through the steel chamber he had set up. If that allowed him to escape, things would become troublesome. Crocodile lay on the ground, blood gushing from his nose and mouth. That kick had left his mind hazy, his vision spinning. Shaking his head vigorously, he tried to clear his thoughts, but the searing pain in his skull was still intense. Just as he struggled to get up, an immense force suddenly struck from behind. Boom! Crack! Two sounds echoed simultaneously. Crocodile, who had barely managed to push himself up, was instantly slammed back down. His ribs were completely shattered. A mouthful of blood spewed from his lips as unbearable pain twisted his face into an agonized grimace. The ground beneath him caved in, forming a massive crater. The calm and composed expression he had earlier was gone. Now, there was only fear and pain. His body was screaming in agony, but he no longer cared about dignity. He slammed his palm against the ground. Instantly, the floor and walls began turning into sand. In the blink of an eye, all the steel vanished, replaced by a vast sea of golden sand. Even the rocky ceiling above disintegrated into dust, letting sunlight pour in. Sables! With a flick of his hand, Crocodile unleashed a massive sandstorm. At the same time, Veer felt the ground beneath him disappear as Crocodile's sand-formed body shot into the sky at high speed. However, Veer simply smirked. As the raging sandstorm rushed toward him, he reached out and touched it. In an instant, the violent tempest transformed into a massive steel cone. Seeing this, Crocodile's eyes widened in disbelief. He was now certain his devil fruit powers were completely ineffective against this man. Who the hell was this guy? Not only is he incredibly strong, but he's also targeting me. Having relied too much on his devil fruit, Crocodile now realized he had no means to counter Veer. Only one thought remained in his mind. Run. Judging by that earlier exchange, he'd be completely overpowered in a physical fight. There was no other option. He had to retreat. As long as he was alive, there was still hope. Once they left, he could still make a comeback. Seeing the sky so close, a smile finally appeared on Crocodile's face. But just as he was about to escape, he saw Veer leap into the air. For a brief moment, panic flashed across Crocodile's face, but he quickly calmed himself. That guy's jumping ability clearly wouldn't be enough to reach him. A victorious smirk returned to his lips. Robin, however, looked grim. Veer had reached his peak height, but there were still over 10 meters between him and Crocodile. Was he really going to let him escape? If Crocodile got away, his revenge would be even more ruthless. This country would still be doomed. But there was nothing she could do. Suddenly, her eyes widened in shock. She stared at the figure above. Just as Veer was about to descend, a black substance appeared beneath his feet. It's steel. Robin couldn't hold back her astonishment. Crocodile's face twisted in terror. Veer was now right in front of him. His expression remained calm, completely unshaken. Chapter 44, Perverted Cook, can you do something like that? At this moment, directly above the secret chamber was the clock tower where Crocodile had planted the bomb. The entire Straw Hat crew had gathered there, desperately trying to climb the tallest building as fast as possible. Only 5 seconds remained before the bomb would explode. A bomb powerful enough to level the entire royal palace. They were preparing to launch one person up in a relay-style effort. Everyone's faces were filled with urgency. But just as they were about to act, the ground suddenly split apart. Hey! What's going on? Chopper staggered backward in shock. Everyone turned their attention to the scene unfolding before them. The ground was turning into sand, and several buildings began collapsing into the depths below. A massive crater soon formed. Then, a battered and bruised figure emerged from within. It's Crocodile. Vivi gasped in shock. She would recognize the man who wanted to destroy her country, even if he were reduced to ashes. Even the two warring armies paused, turning their gazes toward the spectacle. Nami and the others, upon seeing Crocodile in such a state, couldn't help but wonder who had done this to him. Could it have been Luffy? Just as they were questioning it, another figure stepped into view. Who else could it be but Veer? Big Bro. It's Big Bro. He's the one who beat Crocodile like this. Chopper cheered excitedly. Just the sight of Veer made him instinctively smile. Everyone else found it hard to believe. Could a Shishibukai really be no match for Veer? Just how strong had he become? Seeing Crocodile right in front of him, Veer twisted his body, his right leg lashing out like a whip. His leg remained cloaked in a deep black hue. But now, that blackness was darker than ever, an abyssal shade that was terrifying to behold. The dangerous aura it exuded made Crocodile's face twist in sheer terror. He tried to evade, tried to block. But it was too late. Veer's speed far exceeded his expectations. Just as the kick was about to land, Veer's leg suddenly grew even thicker, its raw power palpable. Then... Asterisk boom. Asterisk. A deafening impact resounded throughout the palace. Everyone's eyes widened at the sheer force of it. Crocodile vanished in an instant, and a shockwave rippled outward, sweeping across the entire kingdom. The blast of air was so strong that it sent Chopper flying. Even the massive trees nearby were uprooted by the wind pressure. What the hell is that? Nami and the others couldn't help but cry out in shock. The destruction from that single strike was undeniable. Just the aftershock alone was enough to send people flying. Was this even real? Crocodile, struck squarely in the waist, was launched through the air in a perfect C shape. His trajectory? Straight toward the clock tower. Boom! Another loud crash. Everyone's gazes followed him. A massive hole now gaped in the top of the clock tower. And the bomb was gone. This. Vivi stared in stunned disbelief. The bomb was gone. The danger had been neutralized. Just as that thought crossed her mind, the sky above suddenly lit up. A light rivaling the sun erupted across the heavens. Everyone instinctively squinted their eyes. Boom! A thunderous explosion echoed across the sky. The clouds above instantly dissipated without a trace. Then, another powerful shockwave followed. Fortunately, the distance was great enough that the impact wasn't too severe. Veer landed back in the chamber, his breathing somewhat labored. That kick had drained a huge amount of his stamina. He had pushed his armament haki to the absolute limit. More than half of his energy was gone in an instant. He was still too weak. Normally, coding his attacks in armament haki wasn't particularly exhausting. But using it at full power, far beyond his body's natural limits, had nearly worn him out after just one strike. Even so, Veer was certain if Crocodile wasn't dead, he was at least half dead. That guy had done so much damage to Luffy it had pissed him off. So he hadn't held back. The moment his kick connected, he felt something inside Crocodile rupture. Probably a kidney. On the battlefield, as the wind brushed past them, Vivi and the Straw Hats gulped nervously. First, they were shocked by the sheer power of the bomb. It really could have leveled the entire capital. But even more shocking, Veer's strength. He had not only defeated Crocodile but had also sent both him and the bomb flying high into the sky. That bomb, which should have caused catastrophic destruction, had been reduced to nothing more than a distant gust of wind. "Hey, perverted cook, can you do something like that?" Zoro, still staring at the sky in disbelief, asked Sanji in a trembling voice. "Don't joke with me." Sanji muttered, lighting a cigarette and taking a deep drag. Only then did his emotions finally settle. But the shock in his eyes remained. Big Bro is amazing. He didn't just beat that guy, he even took care of the bomb while he was at it. Chopper mumbled in awe. Deep down, he made a firm resolution to become stronger. To always stay by his big bro's side. Nami and Vivi wore similar expressions. Nami, has Veer always been this strong? No one really knows just how strong he is. At that moment, not far away, a figure wearing a straw hat slowly approached. Everyone's eyes were immediately drawn to him. Then, in the next instant, a chorus of screams erupted. Back inside the chamber, Veer, after taking a moment to catch his breath, turned his gaze toward Robin, who was still lying on the ground. He walked toward her and extended a hand. Robin hesitated for a moment but eventually reached out and grasped it. "Do you have anywhere to go?" Veer asked calmly. There was a trace of concern in his voice, and Robin picked up on it immediately. She looked at him in confusion. Why was this man helping her? What did he want? There was no malice in Veer's eyes. Only tranquility and that faint trace of concern. Though puzzled, Robin shook her head honestly. "Want to come with me? I'm the doctor of the Straw Hat Pirates. Our captain would probably welcome you aboard." Veer smiled warmly as he extended the invitation, his sincerity evident. Robin's expression shifted. She hadn't expected him to invite her to join them. Was it because of her ability to read poneglyphs? Was she going to be used again? She had spent her life on the run, always being exploited. That thought naturally crossed her mind. But from Veer's eyes, she couldn't see any ulterior motive. Just casual ease. And yet, he was genuinely sincere. Could he really just be? Robin hesitated. She felt his sincerity. But that only made her more reluctant to join. This man had saved her life. And he treated her with kindness. How could she possibly bring misfortune upon him? In her eyes, she was nothing but a burden. Chapter 45, Two Choices. No need, I'm used to being alone. I can't handle the noise. Robin refused Veer's offer. Her eyes avoided his, unwilling to meet his gaze again. Thank you for saving my life, but I still refuse. With that, Robin turned and walked toward the exit. Her figure was as resolute as her tone. Seeing this, Veer smirked. He could tell Robin was only afraid of dragging them down. Now that he knew the reason, things would be much simpler. We're pirates. Do you know what that means? Plundering, pillaging, taking what we want. Who cares if you agree or not? We'll just take you. With that thought, Veer's voice rang out sharply, stop. Hearing this, Robin immediately froze. Veer slowly walked in front of her. Seeing the conflict in her eyes, he almost couldn't hold back a laugh. Keeping a stern face, Veer spoke again, you have two choices. Either come with me willingly, or I'll carry you over my shoulder. Robin looked up at him in shock. She had thought Veer was showing his true colors, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw right through his act again. This guy, he's pretending. Even though she knew he was faking his ruthlessness, she had no doubt he would follow through on his threat. He would definitely do it. After a moment of consideration, Robin sighed and relented. Being carried, No thanks. I'd rather walk on my own, she said helplessly. Although she was being forced into it, she clearly wasn't as resistant as before. Hearing this, Veer nodded in satisfaction. Smart choice. Soon, the two of them left the secret chamber. Robin followed closely behind Veer, afraid he'd think she was trying to escape. Veer led her in the opposite direction of Luffy and the others. As they got further and further away, Robin couldn't help but feel confused. But she didn't ask anything and simply followed in silence. After walking for about 10 minutes, Veer finally stopped. Should be around here, he muttered, scanning the surroundings before his gaze locked onto a corner nearby. There, a figure lay motionless. Found him. Veer's face lit up as he quickly walked over. As he got closer, he saw Crocodile lying there, half dead. The massive cloak he always wore had been destroyed in the previous explosion. His entire body was in shambles. The most gruesome injury was his waist, where a massive chunk was missing, the result of Veer's devastating kick. He was barely breathing. If left alone, he'd be dead in minutes. Robin frowned slightly at the sight. This was the worst she had ever seen him. Why was Veer here? Was he going to finish him off? She couldn't help but think. If Veer knew what she was thinking, he'd probably laugh out loud. Finish him off? What a joke. The loot hasn't even been collected yet, I'm just here for my spoils of war. With Crocodile defeated and his top officers incapacitated, nothing else in this country could pose a threat anymore. Once the loot was secured, it would be time to leave. He couldn't wait for the next destination, Skypia. Enel's rumble fruit was a must-have. The strongest Logia fruit, hands down. It would massively boost his combat power. Even though he had armament haki now, he was still too weak. He didn't have any particularly powerful offensive techniques. Against stronger opponents, he still couldn't win. Like Kuma, for example. But if he obtained the power of lightning, things would be different. His speed would skyrocket, his attacks would be electrifying, and he'd even gain an extra way to save people. And if that still wasn't enough to beat Kuma, at least he could short-circuit him. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. No time to waste. Save Crocodile, grab the loot, and get out of here. With that decided, Veer examined his masterpiece. A quick assessment, 80% of his bones were shattered, a kidney was missing, and there were some severe burns. Treatable. A bit of rough handling, and he'd be good to go. Veer had already figured out the system's mechanics. He didn't need to completely heal someone to get rewarded, just doing what a normal doctor would do was enough. This applied to enemies. For allies, if he could heal them instantly, why make them recover slowly? Instant healing gave him more negative points anyway. Looking at the unconscious Crocodile, Veer didn't hesitate. He pulled out his anesthetic brick. Swinging his arm in a full arc, he smashed it onto Crocodile's head. Robin was terrified. This had to be an execution. And he even used a brick so brutal. But unbeknownst to her, despite looking unconscious, Crocodile was actually wide awake. Anesthetic brick. Effect: striking a defenseless target will induce anesthetic status. Anesthetic status: conscious mind, paralyzed body. Price: 2,000 points. Yep, it even had a built-in forced wake-up service. Totally worth the money. Crocodile was utterly dumbfounded as he processed everything happening around him. The moment he sensed Veer's presence, a chill ran down his spine. Why is he here again? What does he want? Crocodile was incredibly anxious, but he couldn't move at all. Meanwhile, Veer pulled out a scalpel and began working on Crocodile's arm. He sliced through the skin, exposing the shattered bones inside. Just as he was about to take out a pair of tweezers from his medical kit, he changed his mind. Too much hassle to sterilize them. Instead, he picked up two thin branches from the ground and started fishing out bone fragments with them. Crocodile might look pitiful, but the only real issues were his fractures and burns. Everything else was minor. The fractures were fatal, though, so Veer planned to replace his bones. His medical kit had a variety of fresh, suitable bones for transplant. But first, the broken ones had to come out. Ding! Congratulations, you've earned 2,000 negative points. Ding! Congratulations, you've earned 1,500 negative points. Crocodile was in agony. What kind of torture was this? This was pure cruelty. A scalpel cutting through flesh, tree branches scraping inside wounds. This wasn't medical treatment, this was punishment. And worst of all, he couldn't move at all. He could only endure the torment. Robin, watching from the side, was equally stunned. What was he doing? Torturing him? She couldn't understand, so she finally spoke up. Isn't he unconscious? What's the point of torturing him? Without stopping his hands, Veer chuckled. You think he's unconscious, but he's actually wide awake. In just 10 minutes, Veer completed the entire bone replacement process. World record speed. As for the experience, best not to talk about it. With the bones fixed, the burns were easy to handle. He dumped his homemade cheap medicine all over Crocodile, then wrapped him up like a mummy with some old bandages. Done. Ding. Congratulations, you've earned 2,500 negative points. Ding. Congratulations, you've acquired Observation Haki, Intermediate. Chapter 46, The Archaeologist. This guy. Damn. Veer stared in disbelief at the ability he had just acquired. You sneaky bastard. Hiding something like this all along. To be honest, Veer was completely stunned. Is this the power of plot armor? During the battle just now, Veer didn't sense this guy using Observation Haki at all. And not just any Observation Haki, it was intermediate level. That's already quite high. But this guy acted like he didn't even know how to use it, not even a hint. Maybe he hadn't used it in so long that he forgot how, or something like that. In any case, he didn't use it. And now, Veer had drawn it. This was beyond satisfying. And to top it off, Skypia was full of people using mantra, which was essentially Observation Haki for everyone. Now that Veer had mid-level Observation Haki, wouldn't dealing with them be a piece of cake? This was like having a pillow handed to you just as you got sleepy. The Grand Line had barely started, and he already wielded 2 types of Haki. Veer was in an excellent mood. Wait here for a bit, I'll be right back. Veer said to Robin before dashing off at full speed, leaving behind a confused Robin. Is he not worried that I'll run away? Robin murmured to herself. But thinking about the consequences of getting caught again, a faint blush crept onto her face. Forget it, might as well not run. Robin didn't have to wait long. About 3 minutes later, a motorcycle screeched to a stop in front of her. It was still Smoker's bike, but its appearance had changed. Veer had reshaped it into a modern motorcycle. This design reduced wind resistance and boosted speed significantly. He tossed Robin a pink cartoonish helmet, gesturing for her to get on. Robin eyed the not-so-spacious seat hesitantly but eventually took the helmet from Veer's hand. Soon, the two sped off into the distance, but Robin, seated in the back, was visibly uneasy. The battlefield was filled with craters from the two armies clashing, which meant some inevitable body contact during the ride. And so, Robin's delicate face grew redder and redder. Veer's driving skills were solid, and in less than 2 minutes, Luffy and the others were in sight. Nami and the rest were looking at Luffy's severed arm with deep concern. Luffy, however, just grinned like an idiot. The massive explosion earlier had caused both sides to temporarily halt the battle. Vivi seized the opportunity to shout out the truth to the soldiers below. Veer slowly brought the motorcycle to a stop, listening to Vivi's desperate cries. He knew then the war was coming to an end. As soon as the others saw this ridiculously cool helmeted figure, they instantly recognized him. Veer's outfit was quite distinctive, after all. With Veer back, all eyes turned to him. Their expressions were filled with urgency. Just as they were about to ask about Luffy's arm, their gazes landed on Robin behind Veer. The words they were about to say were immediately swallowed back. The urgency on their faces transformed into wariness. Isn't she the second in command of Baroque Works? Veer, you. Nami was the first to voice her doubt. None of them could understand why Veer had brought Robin here. Robin, seeing the wary looks from everyone, couldn't help but feel a bit dejected. Her slender fingers subconsciously gripped Veer's shoulder tighter. At that moment, Veer slowly removed his helmet. Instead of answering immediately, he turned his gaze toward Luffy. Luffy, as expected, looked excitedly at Veer and Robin, grinning as he asked, Veer, is this our new crewmate? Seeing Luffy's dumb expression, Robin's gaze toward him subtly changed. Veer, on the other hand, instantly knew this idiot captain wouldn't object. He would probably even raise both hands in approval. How, you ask? Well, he was still holding a preservation device. If Veer had said no, Luffy might have tried to kidnap Robin himself. With that certainty, Veer finally turned to Nami and the others, clearing his throat before introducing, "This is Nico Robin, from now on, she'll be our ship's archaeologist." Hearing this, Nami and the others were stunned. Wasn't she their enemy? How did she become a crewmate in the blink of an eye? Robin also looked at Veer in surprise. Only Luffy, Chopper, and Sanji were gleefully circling the motorcycle. Chopper didn't know Robin, he had never met her before. But if Big Bro brought her, she must be a reliable companion. Yay yay! We got a new crewmate. And an archaeologist too. He. Are you really good at archaeology? What exactly is archaeology? And what does an archaeologist do? Luffy, being Luffy, immediately bombarded Robin with a series of questions. Robin couldn't hold back a small smile. That smile nearly knocked Sanji out cold. Another beauty aboard? Joining this crew was the best decision of his life. He was already fantasizing about their beautiful future together. As long as she was a beauty, there was no way Sanji would object. Seeing the situation, the others knew this was already settled. And they weren't particularly worried. After all, Veer had brought her. Veer had just proven how reliable he was. If it had been Luffy, that would have been a different story. In any case, Robin was now tentatively accepted by the crew. Veer. What about Luffy's arm? Yeah, Veer, we need to reattach it quickly, or there might be long-term consequences. That's right, we can't afford to delay this. Everyone spoke seriously. Even Luffy stopped goofing around and looked up at Veer. He knew this wasn't a small matter. Veer glanced at them. Nami, covered in dirt, with wounds on her arm and shoulder still oozing blood. Sanji, his right calf twisted at an odd angle. Usopp, nose broken. Zoro, barely holding together after already being bandaged up, but now those bandages were stained red again. Veer was slightly moved. They were all seriously injured. Especially Zoro. Yet their only concern was Luffy's arm. TCH, this was really. To reattach it, we need to do it in my operating room. Veer said, a hint of emotion in his tone. Why the operating room? Because it was sterile, of course. This was their captain, and reattaching an arm was no small procedure. A good environment was crucial for post-surgery recovery. Upon hearing his words, everyone was momentarily stunned before their faces lit up with joy. If Veer said he could fix it, then there was no doubt. The priority now was getting back to the ship as soon as possible. Then let's go now. Everyone spoke in unison. Without hesitation, they hoisted Luffy up, ready to carry him back. Seeing how eager they were, Veer had no objections. He was more than happy to get moving. But looking at their battered state. If they walked, they might collapse from exhaustion first. What are you doing? Carrying him back? His arm is hurt, not his legs. I'll give you all a ride. Veer sighed, face palming. Everyone turned to look at his small motorcycle. This thing? Carry all of them? No way. Just as they were confused, Veer's motorcycle started to transform. Chapter 47, Ding. First, there was a strange mechanical whirring sound. It was just like a transformer shifting into a new form. Immediately after, Veer and Robin's figures began to rise. Robin was watching all of this in shock. 10 seconds later, a massive, imposing machine appeared before everyone. It was none other than a brand new tractor. But a mechanical version of a tractor. It looked much more intimidating. Don't just stand there, get in. Sitting in the driver's seat, Veer impatiently called out to the dumbfounded crew. Yo. What is this? Veer, this is way too cool. You can even transform. Luffy, being Luffy, immediately jumped onto the hood of the tractor. Only then did the others snap out of their daze. They quickly climbed into the cargo bed at the back. As soon as they got in, they were surprised to find that the vehicle actually had seatbelts. A beat-up tractor, with seatbelts? What's the point of that? Though puzzled, they still chose to buckle up, prioritizing safety. At that moment, Nami suddenly thought of something. What about Vivi? She voiced her concern. Everyone turned to look at the woman who had fought so hard for her country. With just that one glance, they all had their answer. She wasn't cut out to be a pirate. She has her own path to follow. It's obvious that her road and ours do not intersect. Buckle up. Hold on tight. We're taking off. Veer finished speaking and started the vehicle. The massive engine roared to life. The sound was so loud that it was a little terrifying. It made their hearts clench involuntarily. A sense of impending doom instantly washed over them. And sure enough, after a few swift operations, Veer stomped on the gas pedal. The tractor shot forward in an instant. Everyone in the back was thrown backward uncontrollably. If not for the seatbelts, they would have all been flung out of the vehicle. Nami and the others let out ear-piercing screams. At the front, Luffy held onto the hood tightly with his one remaining hand. But his face was filled with nothing but excitement. His wild howls echoed across the desert. The others, however, had a completely different experience. Wasn't this speed a bit too much? Was this even still a tractor? Might as well call it a flying tractor. Did it have to be this terrifying? Were they about to take off into the sky? 0 to 100 in 0.3 seconds. Not bad, not bad. Veer muttered to himself. With an average speed of 450 km per hour, the tractor quickly brought them to their destination. Without minding the others, Veer first carried Luffy into his room. Looking at Luffy, who had vomited all over the place, Veer was speechless. The rest of the crew wasn't faring any better, all of them were retching. Veer's driving skills were decent, but at this speed, no amount of skill could help. Despite their condition, they still forced themselves to walk to Veer's door. Just as they reached it, they suddenly heard a chilling, blood-curdling scream from inside. The scream made everyone shudder. Even Luffy couldn't handle it. Crap, they were all doomed. Meanwhile, the news of Crocodile's defeat and his crimes quickly reached the world government. Saint Saturn slowly put down the receiver. The call ended. What a nuisance. Now we have to find someone else to fill his position. Saint Saturn spoke with a hint of frustration. Humph. Useless. Losing to a rookie pirate, what an embarrassment. Now we have to go through the trouble of finding a replacement. The bald elder beside him snorted in annoyance. Things have already progressed this far. Complaining won't change anything. That rookie does seem somewhat capable. He awakened armament haki at such a young age. Saint Saturn found Veer somewhat intriguing. It's nothing special. Armament haki is fairly common. He's just a greenhorn. Let the Marines take care of it. A Shichibukai was taken down. We can't just let this slide. The elder, who resembled a wild boar, spoke up. Saint Saturn didn't object. The decision to have the Marines hunt down these pirates was unanimously approved. The Marines soon received the message. Upon learning that Crocodile had been defeated by a rookie pirate, the Marine headquarters conference room fell into brief silence. When Garp heard that it was his grandson's crew that caused this mess, his old face broke into a wide grin. He munched on his senbei with even greater enthusiasm. The government wants us to send someone to eliminate them. Sengoku finally spoke, his expression stern. The officers exchanged glances. There was some surprise on their faces. A pirate crew with a captain worth only 30 million berries had made it to their top-level meetings? That crew should feel honored. Kawa-ne are rookies these days really this scary? Even a Shichibukai isn't their match. Kizura drawled lazily, clipping his nails with a pervy expression. Defeating Crocodile in his first real battle, what a terrifying little guy. Aokiji, usually laid back, looked mildly surprised. He had met Crocodile before. The guy had some strength. A rookie, hey? Scary indeed. Do we really need to discuss this? Just send a captain. If that doesn't work, a rear admiral will do. There are countless pirate crews like them on the seas. Akainu, looking as serious as ever, spoke impatiently. Sengoku's expression darkened slightly, but before things could escalate, Tsuru stepped in to smooth things over. Defeating Crocodile is already proof of their strength. I suggest sending a vice admiral. We should be cautious. Her words were met with nods of agreement. Indeed. A rookie with such terrifying potential must be snuffed out early. I'll go. I guarantee absolute success. Doberman, a hardliner, declared with a fierce expression. Seeing someone volunteer, Sengoku, who had been considering who to send, immediately approved. Since you're free, I'll leave it to you. Be careful, don't let anything go wrong. Doberman scoffed with disdain. Relax. I'll get the job done. Ding. Congratulations, host, for gaining 3000 negative points. Ding. Congratulations, host, for gaining 3500 negative points. Ding. Congratulations, host, for acquiring the ability, Synopsis. Ding. Congratulations, host, for acquiring the ability, Swordsman's Heart. Ding. Congratulations, host, for acquiring the ability, Exoskeleton. Ding. Congratulations, host, for acquiring the ability, Sharpshooter's Eye. Ding. Congratulations, host, for acquiring the ability, Child of the Weather. Chapter 48, I know a little bit. Synopsis, greatly enhances recovery after exiting combat. Swordsman's Heart, makes your will unbreakable. Exoskeleton, permanently increases damage resistance by 100%. Sharpshooter's Eye, greatly enhances perception. Child of the Weather, greatly enhances elemental affinity. The deck was unusually quiet, with only Veer and Chopper enjoying the sea breeze. Veer casually tossed a freshly made pill to Chopper while munching on the sandwich Chopper had prepared for him. At the same time, he glanced at the system notifications. Everyone had sustained serious injuries. He had spent the entire night tending to them. Now, they were all back to full health. They just weren't in the mood to be active. Everyone was in their rooms, caught up in their emotions. Robin had temporarily taken over as the helmsman. They had set sail shortly after boarding yesterday. She hadn't rested since. He'd have to take over her duty soon. Speaking of which, this round of treatment had yielded significant gains. He had gained some impressive abilities. Especially Synopsis and Exoskeleton. These two skills would be absolutely overpowered in the late game. Synopsis was self-explanatory, just look at Luffy, who could lie down for a bit and spring back to full health. As for Exoskeleton, its resistance to damage scaled with strength. If he could one day reach Kaido's level of physical toughness and then double that durability with Exoskeleton, that would be insane. It was essentially the ultimate tank ability. Massive resistance to damage. The other three abilities' potential wasn't immediately clear. He'd have to test them later. However, the ability Child of the Weather, which he got from Nami, caught his attention. He could already feel the increase in elemental affinity. The wind and water elements around him were abnormally active. He could clearly sense their presence. But he wasn't yet able to manipulate them. And there were more elements than just wind and water. If he obtained the powers of the Rumble fruit, his ability to sense lightning elements would greatly enhance his combat effectiveness. Every Logia-type devil fruit corresponded to an element. So Nami's ability would definitely prove useful in the future. For now, it just made the sea breeze feel extra pleasant. Veer checked his current assets. Negative points, 18,000. Right, he had spent 30,000 on the Divine Medical Arts yesterday. His balance was now significantly lower. But Divine Medical Art was incredibly cost-effective. Upon unlocking it, a flood of medical knowledge filled his mind. His medical skills instantly reached top-tier levels. A vast amount of pharmaceutical knowledge and potion formulas surfaced in his mind. At this moment, Veer felt overwhelmingly powerful. The pill he had just tossed to Chopper was an improved version of the Rumble Ball. He had actually developed 3 variations. But Chopper's body could only withstand the first version for now. After consumption, it still granted transformation abilities, but also provided an additional 50% boost to strength and speed. And it lasted for a full 3 hours. Most importantly, no side effects. No post-use exhaustion. Chopper's old Rumble Balls were essentially overdrawing his stamina. To think that he had earned so much from just the Alabasta arc. Not only had he obtained both types of haki, but his physical strength had also reached levels close to Rob Lucci. And that wasn't even mentioning the other powerful abilities he had gained. Both steel transformation and shaping were insanely useful, practically broken. Last night, he even tested whether steel transformation and shaping could be used on people. The answer was no. He could temporarily turn Chopper's antlers into steel, but he couldn't reshape them afterward. Because according to the system, that was living steel. And shaping could only be applied to non-living objects. A pity it was close to being a conceptual god-tier ability. Veer roughly estimated that his current strength should be at least at the level of a Marine Rear Admiral. If his physical stats improved further, he could reach the level of a normal Vice Admiral. Vice Admirals all had mastery over both types of haki. Though Veer had mastered both, his stamina wasn't high enough to maintain them for extended periods. So he couldn't quite be considered Vice Admiral level yet. Given all the commotion he had caused, the Marines would likely take action. After all, the one who defeated Crocodile wasn't Luffy. And Veer had no strong backing. It was only natural for the Marines to send someone after him. An admiral was out of the question. No admiral would waste their time chasing after a rookie pirate who had barely set sail. A rear admiral wouldn't be strong enough, considering Crocodile's level. At the very least, a vice admiral would be sent. But an ordinary vice admiral wouldn't be able to capture him. His numerous abilities weren't just for show. They all provided significant combat boosts. Even if he couldn't win, he certainly wouldn't lose. Their next destination was Skypia. Getting there would be tricky. They needed to find a guy named Mont Blanc Cricket. He knew where the knock-up stream would erupt. By riding that stream, they could reach Skypia. Just as Veer was thinking this, his expression suddenly changed. He sensed something unusual. The sea. It was about to get rough. Without hesitation, Veer dashed into the kitchen-cum-resting quarters-cum-helm room. "Chopper! Take down the sails in 3 minutes!" he shouted before heading inside. Robin was at the helm, carefully steering the ship in the direction indicated by the log pose. Seeing Veer rush in frantically, she was startled. But there was no time to explain. Veer grabbed the wheel and executed a full 3,600-degree spin. The ship made a sharp right-angle turn. Everyone on board was thrown off balance. Those lying in bed tumbled to the floor. They all stumbled out, bewildered. An angry Nami stormed toward the helm. She wanted to see who was messing around. Robin glanced at the perfectly clear skies and had no idea what Veer was doing. But seeing his expression, she remained silent. Just as Nami reached the door, ready to burst in, she felt something too. Her face changed drastically as she shouted, "Quick! Take down the sails!" But as she turned her head, she saw that Chopper had already done it. Moments later, a fierce wind roared. In the direction they had just been sailing, an enormous whirlpool had begun forming. The vortex's winds would have dragged any ship to the ocean floor. Luckily, the sails had been taken down. And the ship was now outside the whirlpool's range. Everyone stared in shock at the massive vortex behind them. A rough estimate put its diameter at 5,000 meters. Getting caught in it would have been a nightmare. Fortunately, Veer had predicted it. The ship soon reached calm waters once more. The sails were raised again. But everyone was still shaken. Even Nami was puzzled. She had only sensed the disturbance a minute before the whirlpool formed. The cabin door opened, and Veer walked out. Seeing him, Nami's eyes widened in shock. "You can navigate?" "A little bit." Crisis averted, Veer headed for his quarters without looking back. He needed to prepare some medicines for his medical kit. The divine medical arts had provided him with a trove of miraculous formulas. It was enhanced perception and elemental affinity that had allowed Veer to sense the danger in time. The others stood there, dumbfounded. What is this guy made of? He can fight, heal, steer the ship, what can't he do? Chapter 49, I am the log pose. After this incident, everyone seemed to have regained their spirits. No longer did they look like they were on the verge of death. They went back to doing what they were supposed to do. Although they had suffered a huge mental blow, the increase in their strength made them feel like it wasn't entirely unacceptable. Veer's treatment had significantly boosted their abilities. While they had witnessed this once before, experiencing it themselves was still utterly shocking. They were amazed by Veer's exceptional medical skills and equally stunned by his ruthless methods. This guy showed no mercy, he went all out, as if he were trying to kill them. This only made them even more eager to grow stronger. After all, the stronger they were, the less likely they were to get injured. Because once they got injured, the consequences were unimaginable. This led to a training frenzy on the ship. Even Luffy stopped fishing and joined Zoro's training squad. Nami, after witnessing Veer's abilities, became especially determined. If she couldn't even compare to the ship's doctor, what kind of navigator was she? Meanwhile, Veer was experimenting on his rumble balls with Chopper. He had only made 10 of this first version. It should be enough until Chopper unlocked the second version. Since there were no side effects, Veer decided to just let Chopper eat one directly to experience it firsthand. But before that, he wanted to measure Chopper's strength without it. "Come on! Punch me!" Veer spoke up immediately. The burly Chopper hesitated for a moment, but seeing Veer's confident gaze, he clenched his fist and threw a punch at Veer with all his strength. Veer didn't dodge or block, it landed squarely on his face. Chopper was instantly terrified. He rushed to check if Veer was hurt. "Big bro, are you okay? Why didn't you block?" As he spoke, he suddenly stopped. He had thought that his fierce punch would have caused his master significant damage. But at this moment, Veer's face didn't have so much as a scratch. Not even the skin was broken. Chopper, in disbelief, touched Veer's face, and upon confirming it was completely unharmed, his eyes widened in shock. "Big bro, what's going on? I couldn't even break his defense?" Just as he was utterly stunned, Veer spoke up. "Only 800 Jin of force. Chopper, that's not good enough. Try again after taking this." With that, Veer tossed a rumble ball to Chopper. Hearing Veer's comment that he was weak, Chopper felt the need to prove himself. He caught the pill and immediately swallowed it. Closing his eyes, he began to feel the changes in his body. Very quickly, Chopper's aura shifted. Even his body seemed to grow more robust. Arm boost. At that moment, Chopper's eyes snapped open, and with a loud shout, he threw another punch at Veer. This time, his right arm was clearly much thicker, brimming with power. Even his speed had increased significantly. So much so that even Veer was a bit surprised. This time, Veer didn't take the hit head-on. He simply raised his hand and effortlessly blocked Chopper's strike. With a muffled boom, the impact echoed. Chopper's eyes widened again. This punch had at least 5,000 Jin of force. But his master. Just how strong was his master? It was simply unbelievable. "Not bad, you reached 6,000 Jin. The drug actually brought out 130% of its intended effect." Veer spoke again. Chopper's strength had increased by at least 700%. Normally, it should have only been a 500% boost, but Chopper seemed highly compatible with this drug. This thing was only suitable for animals. Otherwise, Veer would have wanted to eat it himself. "This stuff has no side effects. I'll give you a few more, get used to them over the next few days. If you run out, come find me." Veer finished speaking, and Chopper was completely dumbfounded. From the way his master spoke, it sounded like these were as common as cabbage. So he could just eat them whenever? "Oh, and if you take 3 at once, you can transform into your monster point. You won't lose your rationality, but the duration is short, and there will still be a period of weakness afterward. Try not to use it unless necessary. This is just the first version, so the effect is a bit lacking. But that's because you are still too weak. When you get a bit stronger, I'll give you an even better version." Veer patted the utterly dumbfounded Chopper on the shoulder and said earnestly, "Train hard. Don't be stingy using them, big bro has plenty." With an encouraging look, Veer turned and went back to his room. He still had a lot of medicine to prepare. Meanwhile, Chopper stood there, completely stunned. Staying rational even in Monster Point? Something he had struggled with for so long was solved just like that by Veer? And he called this the first version? Said its effects were lacking? This is lacking. Chopper now felt terrifyingly strong. Once he got used to his boosted body and transformed states, he felt like he could even fight Sanji and Zoro. And this was just the first version. How strong would the later versions be? More importantly, his big bro seemed to have an unlimited supply. If he wanted, he could stay in this state for life. He could eat rumble balls like candy. No way. Big bro is so good to me. I absolutely can't let him down. I need to train hard. I will become the first reindeer to awaken armament haki. And so, the training squad gained another devoted member. 3 days later, under the guidance of an increasingly determined Nami, their journey remained completely safe. There were several moments when Veer sensed something, but before he could even say anything, Nami had already reacted. Every time, she would turn and ask, "How was that? Not bad, right?" Like a little girl seeking praise, she wanted Veer's approval. Each time, Veer would give her a few words of encouragement. But he couldn't help but admire Nami's talent. When she put her mind to it, she was truly unmatched by a half-baked navigator like himself. Eventually, Nami encountered a log pose pointing skyward. Confused, she had no idea what was going on. So she went to ask Veer and Robin. Robin had been staying in Veer's room lately, helping him out. When she wasn't busy, she would sit there reading. Though whether she was only reading was another matter. Hearing Nami's question, Veer immediately knew Skypia was near. He explained the concept of Skypia and told her they needed to head to an island called Jaya. There, someone would know how to reach the sky. Moreover, Jaya had Bellamy. His ability wasn't bad. If he came knocking, it might be worth taking. They wouldn't spend too much time there. At most, a day, before setting sail for Skypia. Jaya Island? But we don't have a log pose. How do we know where to go? The only log pose they had pointed straight up into the sky, leaving Nami at a loss. No log pose? In that case, they'd just have to use a human compass. Since the log pose pointed toward the sky, Jaya must be close by. Determining a direction? Easy. Veer led Nami to the ship's bow. Pushing his sensory abilities to the limit, he closed his eyes and focused for several seconds. Feeling the elements around him, Veer finally locked onto a direction. That way there were faint traces of earth drifting in the air. Nami watched Veer's actions with growing shock. This looked like sensing something? Just like what she sometimes did. But she only ever got vague feelings. Could it be that Veer was sensing those same things? Nami. Steer that way. Veer opened his eyes and pointed confidently. Nami was stunned. That direction, she had also sensed something faintly different there. Though it was too indistinct to grasp, after witnessing Veer's process, she had a realization. It must be the elements. But then she had another thought. She could barely sense it. Why could Veer perceive it so clearly? Was this his terrifying talent? Her gaze toward Veer completely changed. This guy wasn't human. As if his medical skills weren't enough, his navigation instincts were monstrous. How was anyone supposed to compete? Before long, Jaya came into view. Nami clenched her fists, determination flaring. She had to catch up to this monster. She would master elemental sensing, no matter what. Chapter 50, Damn! An assassin. As for how Veer was able to pull this off, it was, of course, due to the combination of his two abilities. Usopp's enhanced perception allowed him to perceive these elements more easily. And no, this wasn't some kind of innate talent, don't get it twisted. Under Veer's guidance, they made their way to the back of the island, bypassing the front entirely. There, they found Cricket, who had been diving in this area for over a decade. However, they found him unconscious on the ground. Beside him, two monkeys wearing clothes stood anxiously by his side. As the Going Merry approached, the monkey brothers immediately became wary. Luffy's eyes lit up the moment he saw the two clothed apes. Before the ship had even come to a full stop, he leaped off and dashed toward them. Zoro tried to stop him, but it was a lost cause. Seeing this, Zoro had no choice but to dock the ship quickly before chasing after Luffy. The rest of the crew disembarked soon after. Nami had just briefed them on the situation. Right now, they needed the help of the person here. Veer, holding Chopper, had just jumped down when Luffy's shout rang out. Oi! Veer! This old man has passed out. Come and save him. That signature yell immediately caught Veer's attention. Unconscious? It must be another episode of his illness. This old man suffered from a diving sickness. It was caused by his years of continuous diving. The main issue was with his lungs. If left untreated for a long time, these episodes would become more frequent. Eventually, it would become life-threatening. No time to waste. Without delay, Veer tossed Chopper to the ground. Instant mount summoning. They quickly dashed toward the fallen man. You guys don't need to worry. Our ship's doctor is the greatest doctor in the world. He'll definitely save this old man. Luffy reassured the monkey brothers. The two apes quickly realized Luffy had no ill intent. They had been panicking just moments ago, feeling helpless. Having someone here who could help treat Cricket was a huge relief. Once Veer arrived, he immediately crouched down to examine the patient. Just as he expected, it was diving sickness. Move him into the house, Veer instructed the two brothers. They had just witnessed his professional assessment firsthand, and by now, they were convinced he was a doctor. Without hesitation, they quickly carried Cricket into a small house nearby. Veer had already made up his mind. He planned to replace Cricket's lung entirely. A perfect chance to test out the artificial organs he had developed. Once inside, Veer wasted no time. He pulled out a brick and smacked Cricket over the head. The monkey brothers were horrified. This guy wasn't a doctor, he was an assassin. All that professional talk earlier had just been an act. He tricked them into letting their guard down. And they actually thought his medical skills were impressive. He was nothing but a scumbag. He had come here to assassinate their big brother. What are you doing? Hey! Stop! Both of them shouted in unison, immediately charging at Veer to stop him. But before they could, Luffy intervened. How did he stop them? Simple, he tied them up, using both his arms and legs. Relax, monkeys. Our doctor saves people like this. He's a super amazing doctor. Luffy still tried to reassure them. But after seeing that, who the hell would believe him? This was clearly an assassination attempt. The two struggled fiercely, but there was no breaking free from Luffy's grip. Thud. Cricket suddenly regained consciousness. As soon as he became aware, he realized someone was stripping his clothes off. Then, a pair of big hands started pressing against his chest. Rubbing around randomly. What the hell? Why can't I move? Who is this guy? Am I about to be violated? Just then, the roar of a chainsaw sent shivers down his spine. What the hell is going on? At this moment, Veer, wielding the same chainsaw he had used on Ace, brought it down onto Cricket's chest. The monkey brothers' eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. He's actually using a chainsaw. You expect us to believe this isn't an assassination? There's no way this is a medical procedure. Who the hell saves people with a chainsaw? Bastard! Under the horrified gazes of the monkey brothers, Veer swiftly extracted Cricket's lungs. His lungs were already riddled with white spots. Once those spots covered the entire organ, his days would have been numbered. The monkey brothers were shocked. Big Bro's lungs, what the hell happened to them? This was clearly a serious issue. Could it be that this guy actually knew what he was doing? How else would he have pinpointed the problem so precisely? But then, Veer reached into his medical kit and pulled out a pitch-black lung. And placed it inside Cricket's body. The monkey brothers were completely dumbfounded. Bro, sorry, we misjudged you. We thought you were a real doctor. You're really something else. You even had a black egg-shaped lung ready to go. Must have been a pain to find one of those. Thanks for going through so much trouble just to kill him. First, the chainsaw, and now a black lung. You're such a good person. Really makes us want to kill you. Don't worry, it'll be over soon. Just hang in there a little longer, Luffy reassured them. But his words didn't have the slightest bit of credibility. Over soon? For who? The Grim Reaper? Ding, congratulations, host, for earning 500 negative points. Ding, congratulations, host, for acquiring the skill, Diving Mastery. Veer glanced at the rewards but didn't pay much attention. After all, they were the ones asking for help. Getting negative points from this was already a bonus. Alright, Luffy, let them go. As soon as Veer said that, Luffy released the monkey brothers. The moment they were free, they lunged at Veer, ready to tear him apart. This bastard had killed their big brother. Even if they died trying, they would make sure he suffered. But just then, a sudden voice interrupted them. You two, stop. I'm fine. Their movements froze instantly. They whipped their heads around to look at the figure on the bed. They locked eyes. Big Bro was alive. Big Bro. They immediately abandoned their attack on Veer and rushed to embrace Cricket. Meanwhile, the Straw Hat crew looked on, completely unfazed, as if this was just another Tuesday. Only Robin was different. She stared at Veer, mouth slightly open in shock. That chainsaw surgery actually worked? She had even suspected Veer was a lunatic and planned to keep her distance. But now, it seemed this was simply his unique approach. Chapter 51, The Doctor Without a Bounty. But then it occurred to her, if she were to get injured in the future, wouldn't that mean? At this thought, Robin's expression immediately changed. It was as if she had thought of something unpleasant. On the other side, after a bout of crying, the three finally calmed down. From the speechless look in Cricket's eyes, it was clear he was completely at a loss. All three turned to look at Veer. The two brothers were the first to speak. Thank you, Miracle Doctor, for saving our big brother's life. Asterisk thud. Thud asterisk. Without hesitation, they both dropped to their knees and kowtowed heavily. At this, Veer and Cricket had the exact same expression, completely dumbfounded. Putting everything else aside, these two were seriously straightforward. And their thoughts were even simpler. The miracle doctor had just saved their big brother, yet they had actually doubted him. Unforgivable. Simply inhuman. Their gazes toward Veer were now filled with gratitude and admiration. After all, they had never seen anyone use a chainsaw to save a life before. All right, it's no big deal. Get up already. Veer was a bit overwhelmed and quickly motioned for them to rise. Seeing that Cricket had awakened, Luffy finally spoke up about their purpose. Uncle, we want to go to Sky Island. Do you know how to get there? Cricket was momentarily stunned upon hearing this. Then, he let out a heavy sigh. If anyone else had asked him this, he would have simply laughed in their face and told them that Sky Island didn't exist. But these people had just saved his life. As he looked into Luffy's burning gaze, to be honest, he saw the reflection of a dream within it. Silently, he sighed in his heart. Ah, forget it. With that thought, he decided to share everything he knew with them. Veer didn't stay to listen. After all, he already knew everything. After bidding the others a quick farewell, he returned to the ship to continue working on the medicine he had yet to finish. That particular medicine was prepared for Whitebeard. The process was rather complicated, so it wasn't done yet. For the past few days, he had been focused entirely on this task, and now, he was in the final stages. Considering that things might get hectic later, he had to make good use of his time. Before he knew it, time flew by, and 2 whole hours had passed. Looking at the bottle in his hand, Veer nodded in satisfaction. During the preparation, he had heard some clattering noises from the ship, but he hadn't paid them much mind. When he finally stepped out, the night had already enveloped everything. The surroundings were eerily quiet. Not a single person was in sight. Veer wasn't surprised. They had probably gone to catch some south birds. After all, without a log pose, they wouldn't be able to navigate at sea. So catching that bird was a necessity. Now, all that was left was to wait for their return. At this moment, Veer also noticed that the Going Merry had undergone some significant changes. Many areas had been reinforced. On both sides, 2 wing-like structures had been installed. It must have been the work of those monkey brothers. Usopp wouldn't be able to do something this intricate. Yo, Miracle Doctor! Are you hungry? Come have something to eat. A voice called out from the shore. Turning his head, Veer saw the 2 goofballs staring at him. He was indeed feeling a bit hungry. Besides, he had some business to take care of later, so he might as well grab a bite first. As for what business? That brat Bellamy would be showing up soon. Cricket's information about the gold had probably reached his ears by now. With his spring fruit, he was definitely a strong offensive fighter. Might as well go all out and increase the chances of taking that ability for himself. Soon, the 4 of them sat around the dining table, happily eating away. There wasn't much conversation because Veer was eating too aggressively. The others couldn't even get a word in. The 3 of them exchanged doubtful glances. Was Veer really that strong? They couldn't tell at all. Before heading out to catch birds, Cricket and the others had offered to help watch the ship. But Luffy had laughed and said, "No need, no need. With Veer here, no one would dare lay a finger on even a single plank of the Merry." From the way he spoke, it sounded like Veer was incredibly reliable. But Veer was just a ship doctor. How could he possibly be that strong? They had even looked into it. Among the Straw Hat Pirates, the highest bounty belonged to Luffy at 30 million berries. Veer didn't even have a bounty. How could he be strong? Or, did Luffy mean something else? At this point, the Marines hadn't updated their bounty records. It was perfectly normal for Veer to not have a bounty yet. Just as they were lost in thought, on a nearby sandbar not far from the Merry, a group of people had already gathered in secret. "Captain Bellamy. It's confirmed. That's just a rookie pirate cruise ship. And everyone else has left, leaving behind only a ship doctor with no bounty." A stylishly dressed man reported to Bellamy. "Humph, even if they were all here, it wouldn't matter. Their highest bounty is only 30 million. There's no way they can stop us from taking the gold." A man wielding a scimitar and dressed fashionably chimed in. This was none other than the first mate of the Hyena Pirates, Sarquis. From his words, it was clear they didn't see the Straw Hat crew as a threat at all. A ship doctor? What a joke. Let's go take what's rightfully ours. Hopefully, that doctor knows his place and doesn't interfere. Otherwise, heh. With that, Bellamy led his crew toward Cricket's small house. Somehow, they had gotten wind of the fact that Cricket had a decent stash of gold. Though not a huge amount, it was still a considerable sum. Enough to cover plenty of expenses. So, they had come straight for it. When they arrived, they found a pirate ship docked there. Just to be safe, Bellamy had someone investigate first. The conclusion? He had worried for nothing. This pirate crew was garbage. And as for that so-called ship doctor? A guy without a bounty wasn't even worth mentioning. Before long, the group arrived at Cricket's front door. Without any nonsense, they immediately fired a cannonball. Inside, the four were startled by the sudden explosion. Looking at the shattered door and the table that had been caught in the blast, Veer instantly lost his appetite. Food was scattered everywhere. Cricket and the Monkey Brothers immediately stood up, faces filled with fury. Who the hell dared to cause trouble here? With that thought, they strode toward the door. But as soon as they stepped outside and saw the people waiting for them, their expressions grew grim. Bellamy. Bounty, 55 million berries. A notorious punk in these waters. If he was here, it wasn't just to break their door down. Before they could even question him, Sarquis arrogantly sneered. Heh. Chestnut head. If you know what's good for you, hand over your gold willingly, and we might just let you live. Hearing this, Cricket realized. They were here for him, not his door. This was bad. Chapter 52, Stop acting like a big shot. That gold was the last piece of evidence proving his ancestors weren't lying. Even though no one believed him. But he would never hand it over. Was this a fight to the death? No, it had to be a fight to the death. With that resolve, they took up battle stances. However, the opposing crew merely laughed in response. Ha. How foolish. Know your place. 3 idiots, do you all have a death wish? Ha. The most arrogant among them was the first mate, Sarquis. Ha, so you 4 pieces of trash actually want to entertain us? This is getting interesting. Through the open doorway, they noticed Veer rise from his seat and step towards the entrance. Thinking he was about to intervene, the enemy crew immediately sneered. Sarquis didn't waste more words. He gripped his twin Nepalese knives and charged forward. The rest of the crew remained still. From Bellamy's perspective, Sarquis alone was more than enough to deal with them. Trash like them wasn't worth his effort. So, he watched with amusement from the back. Sarquis charged in aggressively, displaying an elaborate flurry of attacks against the 3. They didn't dare hold back and fought with everything they had. Yet, they quickly realized something. This guy wasn't as strong as he looked. 3 against 1, he wasn't their match at all. The tide of battle shifted rapidly. Sarquis, who had seemed formidable, was soon overwhelmed, forced completely into the defensive. Bellamy's expression darkened. Was this guy really this weak? Couldn't even handle 3 nobodies? Annoyed, he waved his hand, signaling for the rest of his men to join the fight. Once again, the situation changed. The 2 brothers held back the additional lackeys while Cricket fought Sarquis one-on-one. Bellamy thought, this time, there shouldn't be a problem, right? But reality once again defied his expectations. After being treated by Veer once, Cricket's strength had increased. Now that he had adjusted to Sarquis' attacks, he quickly gained the upper hand, pinning Sarquis down and beating him mercilessly. Veer, watching from the side, didn't move. These guys weren't even a threat. No need for him to step in just yet. Meanwhile, Bellamy was completely disappointed. Trash! Get out of my way! I'll handle this! Sarquis, hearing this, scrambled back, his arrogance completely gone. Bellamy, his legs already coiled with power, exploded forward. His speed was so great that Cricket couldn't react in time. A devastating spring hopper punch smashed into Cricket's face, sending him crashing to the ground. He spat out several teeth on impact. That punch had some serious force behind it. Veer's eyes lit up at the sight. He had already gauged Bellamy's strength the moment he saw him. But this punch! It was 3 times stronger than Bellamy's usual maximum strength. That was no small difference. Seems like the spring fruit had some serious potential after all. Veer decided to observe a bit longer to see if this guy had any more tricks up his sleeve. Bellamy laughed wildly at Cricket, who lay groaning on the ground. Ha ha ha! Old man, with that pathetic strength, you think you can protect your gold? Dream on! Now, are you gonna hand it over willingly, or do you expect someone to save you? But who could you possibly rely on? That pretty boy behind you? Ha 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 ha! He's probably about to piss himself. A bountyless nobody. Thinking he had the fight in the bag, Bellamy started taunting, even dragging Veer into his mockery. This guy's mouth is so damn foul. Acting like a big shot just because he's got a couple of tricks. First thing I do when I fight him? Shut him up. Veer thought viciously. Cricket struggled to his feet, assuming a defensive stance once more. Bellamy's laughter stopped. He got serious. This old man still dared to stand? Unforgivable. His legs compressed once more, springs forming along his limbs. But this time, he didn't charge directly at Cricket. Instead, he bounced around like a rubber ball, ricocheting off the surroundings. Faster and faster. He moved so quickly that after images began to form. Everything he touched, trees, buildings shattered and collapsed. Cricket's face grew solemn, his body tensed to the extreme. He knew one mistake, and he would die. Veer continued watching calmly. This bouncing thing actually increased his speed. Not bad. But suddenly, his expression changed. Because the guy was now bouncing toward the Mary. By now, the surrounding area was nearly destroyed. That guy was likely planning to land one last kick on the Mary before launching his final attack. If that was the case, Veer could no longer just stand by and watch. Bellamy's thoughts were exactly as Veer had suspected. He was ready to smash the old man into pieces with one final blow. His face twisted into a crazed grin. Cricket's heart sank. Judging from the destructive power Bellamy had just displayed, this kick would surely leave a massive hole in the Mary. Instinctively, he turned to look at Veer, wondering what he would do. But Veer was already gone. Boom! Bellamy made his final push. Yet the expected explosion of speed never came. Instead, he stopped mid-air. As if something had glued him in place. The Mary completely unharmed. On the ship's deck, a lone figure stood. His right hand stretched out, gripping Bellamy's ankle. Kid, if I let you break this ship right in front of me, I'd be making a fool of myself. It's our companion too. The voice stunned everyone. Wasn't that the useless ship doctor? They all stared in disbelief at the figure in the dark. Though it was difficult to see clearly, they could still make out that it was Veer. Gasp! When did he move there? Cricket's eyes widened in shock. That speed! Just moments ago, Veer was still standing at the entrance. Did he move faster than Bellamy, who had been storing energy for so long? What shocked him even more? Veer had stopped Bellamy's high-speed charge with just one hand. It seemed simple, but in reality, it was anything but. That massive kinetic force had vanished in an instant. Just how much strength did that require? How was this possible? Wasn't he supposed to be a guy without even a bounty? Chapter 53, he slipped and fell, honest. Bellamy's face was filled with horror. Someone who could forcibly stop him like that? He had never seen such a thing. He knew better than anyone how difficult that was. When he turned around and saw it was Veer, his expression became even more astonished. Impossible! He couldn't help but exclaim, unable to comprehend what had just happened. This useless guy seemed a little unusual. A bad premonition started creeping into his heart. Just then, he saw a figure above move in a blur. In the next moment, a foot came crashing toward his face. More accurately, his mouth. The speed was so fast that he had no time to react. Boom! A dull impact rang out, and a figure was sent flying before slamming heavily into the sand. A massive crater instantly formed, its edges even extending to where Mont-Blanc Cricket was standing. The sudden scene left Cricket utterly shocked. He stared in disbelief at Veer, who was slowly walking toward them, his expression complex and unreadable. But the underlings nearby reacted differently. Their faces were filled with terror. Some even turned around and fled immediately. However, at that moment, the ground itself began to move. The soil seemed to come to life, transforming into massive hands that wrapped around everyone, including Bellamy's first mate. In the blink of an eye, only a few round dirt spheres remained, with terrified screams echoing from within. As Veer clenched his right hand, the spheres began to contract. Soon, everything fell silent. Only Cricket and the two monkey brothers were left, staring at each other with wide eyes. They swallowed hard. Their expressions were rich with emotion. Now, they finally understood what Luffy meant. He wasn't joking at all. With someone like Veer here, at the very least, no one on this island would be able to lay a finger on the going merry. This strength was insane. Veer looked at the dirt spheres, where blood had begun to seep out, and shook his head in disappointment. Liquefying the ground only worked in a small radius. And its strength wasn't very high. If the target was too far away, he couldn't control it at all. This ability really wasn't suited for combat. With a flicker of movement, Veer grabbed Bellamy and lifted him up. He casually tossed him to the ground, then crouched down and took out a handful of teeth from his medical kit. Looking at the unconscious Bellamy whose teeth were shattered, and whose face was deeply dented in, Veer simply got to work. First things first, a brick to wake him up. Thud, with a loud bang, Bellamy's consciousness snapped back. After gently awakening his sleeping soul, Veer began his treatment. The face? No need to bother. He'd just be uglier from now on. All that was needed was to fix his teeth and bandage him up. The rest, he could recover from on his own. To fix the teeth, they first had to be pulled. Since all that was left were broken, shattered remains, Veer decided to replace them all. Taking out a pair of pliers from his kit, he got to work. Some teeth were snapped, some crooked. Pulling them out was no easy task. For some, he even had to press a foot down on Bellamy's head and use all his strength to yank them out. After much effort, he finally finished. Replacing them was simple. The teeth he had prepared were self-developed, with an automatic attachment function. Once inserted in the right position, they would take root on their own. The process, however, wasn't exactly pleasant. Veer didn't hesitate, and before long, Bellamy had a full set of teeth again. To him, they looked pristine. But to Cricket and the others, they looked like the most yellowed, unclean teeth ever. Some even had worms crawling through them, which utterly disgusted them. Ding! Congratulations, host, for obtaining 1000 negative points. Ding! Congratulations, host, for acquiring the ability, Charge Up. Charge Up, after charging, your attacks will deal increased damage. The longer the charge, the higher the damage. Max, 3x damage / 6 seconds. Oh! This was actually a solid offensive ability. Looking at his newly acquired skill, Veer was quite pleased. 3 times the damage wasn't a small number. If he fully charged an attack, he could even create miracles. This was quite the fruitful haul. Veer brother, do you really not have a bounty? Are the Marines stupid? Why don't they have a bounty on you? The monkey brothers stammered as they asked Veer. In their eyes, his strength was easily worth at least 100 million berries. Yet such a pirate had no bounty. Were the Marines asleep? No one was cursing the Marines harder than the still-lying Bellamy. Right now, he hated the Marines more than ever. How could they be so unprofessional? Leaving someone like this at zero bounty? They were basically setting people up. If they didn't want the job, they should just quit. Bounty? I wouldn't know. That thing is useless anyway, just for scaring people. Veer said nonchalantly. But his words left the three of them completely dumbfounded. Scaring people? Wasn't it a symbol of strength? How did it become just a tool for intimidation? Just as they were still processing, a commotion broke out in the distance. Luffy and his crew had returned together. Zoro held a peculiar-looking bird in his hand. Its head was constantly pointing backward toward the south. They quickly approached and immediately noticed the massive crater. They instantly realized what must have happened. Someone had clearly tried to cause trouble. Woo! Veer, was this you? What a huge crater! Luffy exclaimed excitedly. The others wore similar expressions of surprise. Yet, this guy tripped and fell, wrecking the ground like that. Even busted his face. I just patched him up. Veer said, giving Bellamy a small kick. Cricket and the brothers twitched at the corners of their mouths. Who the hell trips and ends up like that? Even in the world of absurdity, this explanation was beyond ridiculous. Oh, he must have been really clumsy then. Bonk. Are you stupid? Why do you believe everything he says? Nami's fist came down hard on Luffy's head. After some commotion, they prepared to set sail. According to Cricket, at dawn, about 40 kilometers south, a knock-up stream would erupt. They needed to hurry. After bidding farewell to Cricket and his crew, the Straw Hats resumed their journey. Throughout the trip, Luffy was bursting with excitement. "We're going to the sky soon. This is awesome. We're all going to the sky together." Bonk. "Shut up, you idiot." After a night of sailing, they finally reached the target location at dawn. The waters seemed calm, nothing unusual. But Veer knew. The big event was about to happen. The knock-up stream was about to erupt, and the surrounding water elements were becoming incredibly restless. As long as they rode the current, they would soar to Skypia. Chapter 54, No Way We're Paying. Suddenly, they felt something strange about the ship. It had started moving sideways. But upon closer inspection, what the hell? A massive whirlpool. An extremely enormous whirlpool had silently formed. They were being dragged by the waves towards the seabed. Everyone's faces were filled with terror. One by one, their faces turned deathly pale. But suddenly, everything seemed to vanish. The sea returned to its usual tranquility. Just as everyone thought it was over, Veer grabbed onto Chopper's little reindeer antlers. And then... Asterisk boom. Asterisk. A gigantic wave surged into the sky. The Going Merry abruptly tilted upwards. The sudden force nearly flung Luffy off the ship. Luckily, he extended his arms and grabbed onto the mast. The others also scrambled to grab hold of something to stabilize themselves. Chopper, swinging helplessly in the wind, looked utterly horrified. This was the same reindeer that got scared just from riding a motorcycle. Now it was on the verge of passing out. Fortunately, Veer had a firm grip on Chopper's antlers, so there was no need to worry about him flying away. Everything around them rapidly blurred as they shot upward. 1,000 meters. 3,000 meters. 8,000 meters. With the current propelling them, their ascent was as fast as a rocket. At one point, a bird even crashed into Luffy's head and exploded on impact. Fast was an understatement. After a few minutes of rapid ascent, the violently shaking ship finally stabilized. The crew slowly opened their eyes. What they saw was an endless sea of clouds. Their ship was now sailing along a river of clouds. The winding cloud river stretched far into the distance, its destination unknown. Everyone looked as if they had just stepped into another world. Staring at the stunning cloudscape, they let out gasps of amazement. Veer looked at Chopper, who somehow seemed quite energetic, and asked in confusion, "Yo, Chopper. You didn't pass out?" "Big bro, I'm fine. I'm completely fine. I'm totally awake. Please don't kill me." Veer's voice had startled Chopper so much that he nearly fell off the ship. The reason he hadn't fainted earlier was because, right before passing out, he suddenly realized what would happen if he did. The mere thought of Veer snapped him awake instantly. "What? You think the speed was too intense?" Compared to one of his master's treatment sessions, this was nothing. Given the choice, Chopper would much rather stay awake and survive. Seeing this, Veer chuckled. The poor kid had trauma. Guess he'd have to be a little gentler next time. As Veer took in the surroundings, he began contemplating their next steps. Soon, they would pass through the Heaven's Gate, which was basically a toll station. But would they pay? What a joke. If anyone dared to pay, Nami would probably kill them. Once they illegally entered Skypia, they would be wanted by the enforcement squad. But it didn't matter. Those guys were just small fry. Veer's true target had always been Enel. Any trouble along the way should be avoided if possible, and if not, it should be dealt with swiftly. Even though Veer knew the original story, he had no idea where to go. It would be best if they could find a local guide. And that guide would be arriving very soon. Once they reached the White Sea, they would be attacked by some native warriors. Perfect, he could just capture one or two of them. Having them lead the way would be ideal. What? What if they refuse? No problem, fights always result in injuries, right? A little medical treatment, and they'd be more than willing. The ship soon arrived at the entrance of the Heaven's Gate. The enormous and majestic gate looked awe-inspiring. One might even mistake it for the gateway to paradise. The ship continued drifting along the Cloud River. But upon reaching the gate, it came to a halt. It was as if the Cloud River stopped flowing at this point. As everyone wondered what was going on, a short and elderly woman walked out from beneath the Heaven's Gate. Her face was full of wrinkles. She glanced at them indifferently before speaking in a monotone voice. If you wish to enter, you must pay a fee of 10 billion extals per person. Everyone was stunned. 10 billion? They didn't know what an extal was, but the number 10 billion was terrifying enough. Can we not pay? Nami tentatively asked, though she didn't hold much hope. But the old woman's response shocked them all. Of course. Everyone was dumbfounded. You could actually enter without paying? Although they were full of questions, they didn't push their luck. If they could get in for free, that was the best outcome. The old woman said nothing more, and the massive gate slowly opened. A giant crab emerged from below, grabbing their ship and carrying them forward at high speed. After another long journey, they finally arrived at the white sea. An endless ocean of clouds stretched before them. The entire surface below was flowing clouds. Is this really the sea? A sea made of clouds. Usopp was tempted to jump in for a swim. Since this was their first time here, there were so many things he wanted to experience. But just as he removed his shirt and climbed onto the railing, he suddenly remembered something unpleasant. His poised to jump stance froze instantly. He awkwardly turned his head to glance at Veer. If he drowned in there, wouldn't he be screwed? Forget it, better not gamble with his life. Usopp climbed down quietly. But the moment he landed, his entire body felt weak. He collapsed to the side, gasping for breath like he had just run a marathon. Everyone stared in shock. All he did was climb up and down a railing. How did that leave him exhausted? Since when was Usopp this weak? As they puzzled over it, a group of strange figures suddenly sprinted across the cloud sea in the distance. They wore peculiar masks, and their shoes emitted bursts of air. Their target seemed to be the Going Merry. Seeing this, Veer's eyes lit up. Here we go. As he observed Usopp's condition, Veer suddenly recalled that bodies needed time to adjust to Skypia's environment. Even minor movements would feel exhausting at first. But that was no problem for him. He opened his medical kit and pulled out a syringe filled with an ominous, jet-black liquid darker than even Garp's armament haki. This was an injection designed to help people rapidly adapt to any environment. Without hesitation, he jabbed it into his own chest. As the serum coursed through his body, Veer immediately felt his breathing become smoother. Meanwhile, the three masked figures leaped onto the ship. Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy quickly realized the intruders were hostile. They launched their attacks without hesitation. But both their speed and strength were far weaker than usual. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't even touch the enemy's clothes. Instead, they exhausted themselves. The three masked attackers took the opportunity to counterattack. Luffy and the others were completely overwhelmed. Before long, all three were down. And now, the masked figures turned their sights on Veer. They intended to take out the most threatening-looking one first. Veer, having observed them closely, already understood their abilities. Nothing special. Their entire combat strength relied on those bizarre dials they carried. Chapter 55, Too Timid. Nami and the others were utterly shocked to see Luffy taken down so easily. Had their strength weakened so much? They barely even fought before collapsing. Were these enemies really that strong? Just as they were worrying, they suddenly noticed that the enemies were now charging toward Veer. Seeing this, they all let out a sigh of relief. Oh, they're going after Veer? Then it's fine. You guys, do your best. The leader of the group, however, seemed to sense that Veer was not someone to be trifled with. Without hesitation, he pulled out a massive cannon from his back and fired directly at Veer. The cannonball was highly destructive. If it so much as touched him, things would go south fast. The cannonball led the attack, followed closely by three spear-wielding warriors. As the cannonball approached, Veer simply lifted his foot and kicked it. Seeing this, the three warriors' faces lit up with excitement. This type of cannonball explodes on contact. This guy was dead for sure. Just another ignorant blue sea dweller. But the expected explosion never happened. Instead, the dark cannonball seemed to turn even blacker. Veer wasn't blown away. Instead, the cannonball had been kicked far off into the distance. The three warriors couldn't comprehend what had just happened. But they had no time to think. They launched their attack, thrusting their spears at Veer in perfect synchronization. Yet, in that moment, Veer suddenly disappeared. Before they could even react, each of them felt a powerful kick land squarely on their stomachs. One of them, held by the neck, didn't get sent flying. The other two weren't so lucky. One was blasted hundreds of meters away, plunging straight into the white sea below. The other, a female warrior with impressive pectoral muscles, crashed hard into the ship's railing. Surprisingly, the railing did not break. Instead, it momentarily transformed into solid steel at the moment of impact. The one in Veer's grip still tried to struggle. But before he could put up much of a fight, Veer lifted him and smashed him headfirst into the iron deck below. Instantly, the man stopped resisting, coughing up a mouthful of blood. The injuries were just severe enough to keep him from getting up anytime soon. Seeing this, the female warrior grew visibly anxious. They had seriously kicked a steel plate this time. This guy was unstoppable. They had to retreat immediately. But she wasn't about to abandon her comrades. Instead, she charged at Veer again. Veer attempted to restrain her by manipulating the wooden planks of the Going Merry, but it didn't go as planned. With agile footwork, she effortlessly slipped past and appeared right in front of him. Her pale right hand lifted slightly, revealing a strange shell in her palm. And then... impact! A powerful impact dial released a devastating shockwave. The blast struck Veer directly in the face. Even Usopp and Nami, standing behind him, were sent flying, crashing into the wooden planks behind them. The attack was fearsome. Everyone anxiously turned to look at Veer. Meanwhile, after delivering the blow, the woman quickly grabbed her fallen comrade and attempted to retreat. But just as she was about to leave, a foot suddenly appeared in front of her chest. Then, boom! A tremendous impact sent her hurtling backward, crashing into the same steel railing as before. This time, even the reinforced steel couldn't hold up, bending significantly from the force. She coughed up a mouthful of blood and could no longer stand. Kneeling on one knee, she looked up at Veer in shock. He had taken a direct hit from her impact dial. Yet he didn't even have a scratch on his face. How was this possible? And just like that, in under 2 minutes, one was missing, and two were heavily injured and captured. Raki couldn't accept this reality. How could someone from the Blue Sea be this powerful? She and Kamakiri were among the strongest warriors in their tribe. Only Wiper was stronger than them. Yet, neither of them had lasted even 2 moves against this man? Just who the hell was he? As Veer approached her, he first grabbed the bent railing. With a simple motion, it returned to its original shape. Then, he casually reached out and pulled off her mask. Sure enough, beneath it was a woman's face. Her long hair cascaded down freely. This woman seemed to be called Raki. At that moment, she glared at Veer with an intense, defiant expression. A look that said she would rather die than surrender. Veer couldn't help but laugh. You guys came looking for trouble, lost miserably, and now you're giving me that look? How unsporting! And you call yourselves bandits? What a disgrace to real outlaws! Raki turned her face away, clearly determined not to acknowledge Veer. But he paid her no mind. Instead, he walked over to the man called Kamakiri, pulling out his medical kit. 1 minute later, screams filled the air. 10 minutes later, the screams finally stopped. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have gained 200 negative points. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have acquired the ability, Dial Mastery. After finishing his treatment, Veer calmly put away his tools. But Raki's gaze toward him had changed entirely. This guy, he was a demon. Then, she suddenly remembered her own injuries. Her heart skipped a beat. Her face turned pale as a sheet, and sheer terror filled her eyes. She glanced at Kamakiri, who now looked utterly lifeless. Her fear deepened. Veer, having packed up his kit, was now walking toward her. Instantly, Raki tensed up. Watching him approach, expressionless yet with a slight smirk playing on his lips, she panicked. No! Stay away from me! What do you want? I'm not sick. I don't need treatment. Stay back. I'm perfectly fine. I'm healthy. She shouted as she backed away. But behind her was the railing. Where else could she go? Veer's grin widened as he walked closer. But in Raki's eyes, this was the most terrifying sight imaginable. Finally, she broke. Just tell me what you want. I'll agree to anything. Just stop, okay? Please. Veer was a bit puzzled by her reaction. Why is she so scared? I just gave that guy a new neck. Well, not exactly a neck, but something similar. Why is she so frightened? She's really too timid. Even the veteran crew members, long accustomed to Veer's bizarre ways, were once again left speechless. Just moments ago, that guy's head had been detached. Veer was getting more and more insane. Robin, in particular, had turned pale. This ship's doctor was even scarier than she had imagined. Chapter 56, Bleeding Gums? Veer sighed helplessly at the scene before him. His method of practicing medicine was apparently even more effective than brutal torture. That was truly something. Seeing the terrified look on Raki's face ahead, Veer decided not to push her any further. Scaring the poor kid too much wouldn't be good. It's nothing else, really. We just arrived here and don't know the place well. We just need you to act as our guide. Veer spoke in a calm and friendly manner. Upon hearing this, Raki froze for a moment. Her expression was indescribable. Guides? Just asking us to be guides? Bro, I was ready to sell out my ancestors 18 generations back, and now you're telling me you just want us to be guides? Does that even make sense? Was that level of torture really necessary just to find a guide? You even chop a head off. And then put it back on. Are you messing with me? Even though her brain was on the verge of exploding from confusion, she still immediately agreed. She expressed her willingness to serve as a guide for them during their time on Skypia. From her tone to her expression, she did her best to convey that she was absolutely doing this voluntarily. Definitely not forced. She was very happy. Even if she didn't understand why, it really wasn't a difficult condition to accept. Seeing this, Veer nodded in satisfaction. Whatever the case, he had achieved his goal. Having a guide would make things much easier. Now, even Raki looked much more pleasing to the eye. But just then, Raki suddenly let out a cough. Veer, who had just turned around, instantly snapped back like a shark that had caught the scent of blood, locking his gaze onto her. She's seriously injured. She needs treatment. Raki, seeing the terrifying gleam in Veer's eyes, turned pale with fright. And no, doctor. I'm fine. But even after she said this, Veer remained unmoved, continuing to stare at her. Realizing how bad the situation was, she ignored the sharp pain from her fractured ribs and battered abdomen, forcing herself to stand up. Not only that, but she even performed a few exaggerated movements to prove she was fine. After doing so, she looked seriously at Veer and said, "See? I'm really fine." But just as she finished speaking, she suddenly coughed up a mouthful of fresh blood. The blood sprayed so far that it even splattered onto Veer's face. Veer blinked, wiped the blood off his face, and even noticed some fragments of internal organs in it. Maybe he had gone a bit too hard just now. Raki panicked even more. Her anxiety was visible to the naked eye. That old blood really couldn't have come out at a worse time. She tried to hold it in, but there was just no stopping it. It's just gum bleeding. I haven't been brushing properly. I'll make sure to brush my teeth better from now on. Her poor excuse made everyone on the ship struggle to hold back their laughter. No way. If they didn't hold it in, they'd truly be unable to contain themselves. Even Veer's lips twitched slightly. Gum bleeding? All right, you win. Since she went this far, Veer decided not to press any further. He had never seen someone with such a strong survival instinct before. Besides, there wasn't much to gain here, so he wasn't interested in wasting time. Fine, if you say so. Let's set out then. Veer said regretfully. Raki immediately sighed in relief. Her life was spared. After speaking, Veer moved over to the 4 people still lying on the ground and injected each of them with a shot. It was the same serum that helped people quickly adapt to the environment. After receiving the injection, the 4 quickly recovered. The exhaustion that had drained them moments ago was gone, and they were full of energy again. They couldn't help but marvel at Veer's medical skills. They had no idea what had caused their symptoms, yet Veer already had an antidote prepared. They had to admit, when it came to medicine, Veer was truly reliable. Just a bit rough. Raki and Kamakiri, who had already gotten up, were also amazed. Normally, Blue Sea dwellers needed at least a few hours to adjust to the White Sea's environment. That was why they usually had no problem hunting down Blue Sea people. But this guy solved the issue with just 1 shot? Unbelievable. Chopper quickly received his injection as well. Now, only 2 women were left. This injection had to be administered directly into the chest, piercing the lung with precision. Veer raised the needle without hesitation and swiftly injected Nami, who cooperatively puffed out her chest. As the serum entered her system, she instantly felt her breathing ease. Her body felt much lighter and more comfortable. But when it was Robin's turn, things got strange. Her face noticeably reddened. Her gaze became unsteady, and her hands fidgeted with nowhere to go. She couldn't even bring herself to look directly at Veer. But the more nervous she became, the more difficult it was for Veer to administer the shot. She was shaking slightly, making it hard to inject properly. With no other choice, Veer held her shoulder down and quickly, precisely, and forcefully inserted the needle. 3 seconds later, he withdrew it. The serum was fully injected. Having finished, Veer immediately turned and walked away to talk with the 2 guides. Everyone else got back to their duties, steering the ship toward their new destination based on the guide's directions. No one noticed that Robin, who should have been feeling better, was actually breathing more and more rapidly. Her flushed, shy face looked like it was about to drip with water. Veer and the guides discussed heading straight for that so-called shrine. Going directly for Enel. But the guides said the ship couldn't sail there directly. The sea currents around that area were too chaotic. Normally, only a waiver, a vehicle similar to a jet ski, could navigate through it. Large ships could only enter if pulled by a special type of crab. Hearing this, Veer recalled something. In the original story, a giant crab at Angel Island carried the ship to the forest where Enel was located, treating it as a sacrifice. In that case, they'd head to Angel Island first. Once there, they wouldn't even need to disembark. Just wait for that big crab to appear. As for Luffy and the others, they could go wherever they wanted. Fewer people meant easier movement. Once inside the forest, the 2 guides would lead him directly to the shrine. As long as he found Enel. A good combo attack would make sure that smug bastard wouldn't know what hit him. Just earlier, Veer realized he could fully charge up an attack before a battle even started. Meaning he could open with a devastating kick, enhanced with armament haki, leg reinforcement, and triple the damage. Wonder if Enel could withstand that. Asterisk splash. Thud, asterisk. In the distance, a figure suddenly burst out from the white sea. He wore a strange mask. One of the 3 from before. Glancing at the departing Going Merry, his face turned anxious as he sped off in the opposite direction. He had to report this immediately. Raki and Kamakiri had been captured. And they were likely being tortured. Chapter 57, This? It's for weaklings. At this moment, dozens of kilometers away, on a barren piece of land covered with large tents. Why are they taking so long to return? Could something have happened to them, chieftain? Inside a significantly larger tent compared to the others, a resolute and battle-hardened man spoke to an elderly figure, who seemed frail with age. The old man lifted his eyes slightly at the words, his voice trembling with age. You are still too young, Whipper. You lack patience. After a pause, he continued, they merely went to hunt down those Blue Sea people who intruded. What could possibly happen? Whipper knew he had spoken rashly. Raki was his childhood friend, and he couldn't help but worry. It had indeed been a long time since they left. But thinking about their strength, Whipper felt somewhat reassured. Just then, a young girl came stumbling into the tent. As she ran, she shouted frantically, Chieftain! Chieftain! This is bad! Wah-ya! The moment she entered, she tripped and fell flat on her face. Whipper sighed helplessly and walked over to pick her up. What's wrong, Isa? What happened? He asked as he steadied her. Raki and Kamakiri, they. Isa gasped for breath, speaking in broken phrases. Hearing Raki's name, Whipper immediately tensed up. What about Raki? Isa, what did you see? This young girl possessed an ability akin to Enel's mantra, though hers was crude and undeveloped. She could only perceive vague impressions. Sister Raki, and Kamakiri, they've been captured. Isa finally completed her sentence, but her words sent a shockwave through Whipper. What? Just as he exclaimed, another figure came crashing into the tent. Whipper. Bad news. Raki and Kamakiri have been captured by a group of Blue Sea people. They're heading towards Angel Island. And Raki. Raki, she. The breathless newcomer spoke in rapid bursts, and Whipper immediately recognized him. He had been with Raki's group. What? Cooley. What happened to Raki? Seeing that Cooley had returned alone and his words matched Isa's, Whipper knew this was real. He was on the verge of rushing out to rescue them but forced himself to calm down and listen to the full report. Raki and the others, they seemed to be getting tortured. The moment Cooley finished speaking, a gust of wind swept past, and Whipper had already vanished. Along with his gear. Deep within the vast forest. A massive vine bore an imposing structure. Inside a grand hall resembling a living room, Enel lay lazily on a sofa, munching on an apple. He had been watching everything unfold near the White Sea's edge. Casually, he tossed the half-eaten apple onto the carpet beside him. One of the nearby priests quickly picked it up and wiped away the stains. A smirk played on Enel's lips. The strongest of the priests, noticed this and asked, "Has someone powerful arrived?" Enel chuckled lightly at the question and murmured, "Powerful? Yeah, I suppose they are. But no matter how strong they are still just humans. They cannot fathom the greatness of a god. At best, they are merely qualified to be sacrifices." Oh! With a loud yell, Luffy leaped off the ship. By now, Veer and his crew had arrived at the shores of Angel Island. During the journey, Luffy had repeatedly attempted to jump into the White Sea to see if he would drown. However, the vivid memory of Veer mercilessly using a toilet plunger to smack Smoker and Bon Clay until their faces swelled up stopped him. After intense internal struggle, he abandoned the idea and quietly stayed on the ship. Now, seeing that he could finally step onto clouds, he wasted no time in jumping down. After securing the ship, the rest of the crew followed. Nami and the others only intended to stay until their log pose was fully charged. Once it pointed to the next island, they planned to leave immediately, avoiding trouble as much as possible. The shoreline resembled any other blue sea beach, complete with vegetation, except the sand had been replaced with clouds. Seeing Luffy land without issue, everyone jumped down excitedly. After all, it wasn't every day they got to visit such a mystical place. Soon, only 5 figures remained on the ship: Veer, 2 guides, a reindeer, and Robin, who gazed into the distance, lost in thought. Chopper, perched on Veer's head, yearned to play with Luffy and the others. But since Veer wasn't going, he chose to stay as well. Noticing Chopper's eager expression, Veer patted his furry head. "If you wanna play, just go." But the moment Veer spoke, Chopper shook his head like a rattling drum. "No. I'm fine." Despite his words, his face still betrayed his longing. Veer sighed helplessly. If it weren't for the giant crab that would be arriving soon, meaning he had to stay on board, he would have taken the little guy down to play in the clouds already. Nearby, Raki and Kamakiri crouched together. Raki's body was wrapped in bandages. Earlier, she had been continuously coughing up blood. Her face had turned paler and paler. Yet, she adamantly refused to let Veer approach her. At this rate, she would succumb to her worsening injuries. Unable to stand by, Chopper examined her wounds. Once he determined the extent of her injuries, he quickly treated and stabilized her condition. His movements were precise and efficient, wasting no time. Identify the problem. Solve it instantly. Raki was stunned. This little reindeer was actually a doctor? That was unbelievable. What shocked her even more was his gentle touch. When giving her an injection, he even softly warned her, "This might sting a little, just hold on." If it were that other guy, wouldn't he just scatter her ashes already? When she learned that Chopper was Veer's disciple, her expression became even more complicated. What, were these two playing it? Why was the difference between them so massive? More importantly, the medicine Chopper used was incredibly potent. For example, the injection once administered, her broken ribs immediately realigned themselves. The pain vanished as well. To her, this was simply inconceivable. How could the Blue Sea have such miraculous medicine? Looking at the gentle Chopper, she couldn't help but ask, "Did you make this medicine?" But Chopper's response left her speechless. "Oh, this? My master just whipped it up casually. He said it only works on weaklings. If someone even a little strong uses it, it won't have any effect." His innocent tone delivered the most devastating insult. Raki was left sulking for a long time. Chapter 58, Tour Guides, Time to Work. Veer looked at Robin, who was lost in thought, but he wasn't surprised. Robin preferred quiet places, so it wasn't unusual for her to stay on the ship. It wasn't a big deal anyway. After dealing with Enel, they still had to wait for the log pose to fully record the island's magnetic field. That process would take about 2 or 3 days. They could take this time to explore the island a bit. Including Robin, there were now 5 sacrifices. Veer could already sense something unusual approaching from beneath the distant ocean surface. It was moving extremely fast. And it was massive. Its movement caused large ripples in the water. It's here. No doubt about it. Just as Veer had that thought, the ship suddenly shook violently. As if something was about to emerge from the water. On the shore, Luffy and the others noticed the disturbance and turned to look in their direction. At that moment, a colossal crab burst out from beneath the waves. Its enormous pincers clamped tightly onto both sides of the Going Merry. Lifting the ship effortlessly, the crab held it up like a mere toy. Its sheer size was enough to send chills down anyone's spine. Luffy and the others were completely stunned by the sight before them. Nami, being the closest, was so frightened by the crab's monstrous appearance that she fell backward. What is that thing? Veer. Veer and the others are still on the ship. Nami stammered. Luffy and the rest quickly snapped out of their shock and rushed forward, ready to fight the crab. But the creature gave them no chance. Clutching the Merry, it scurried off at an incredible speed. The sheer swiftness of the beast left Luffy and the others with no hope of chasing it. In just a few seconds, the Going Merry had completely disappeared from their sight. Hey? What just happened? Did a crab steal our ship? Luffy asked uncertainly. Zoro, his face darkened, responded, steal? That was a blatant robbery. Even with Veer on board, he couldn't stop it. Then doesn't that mean they're in danger? Luffy belatedly realized, his face showing his usual cluelessness. You're just realizing that now. The group shouted in unison. As they debated what to do next, a girl with white wings happened to approach them from a distance. Meanwhile, aboard the Merry, after enduring 3 minutes of an unwanted pirate ship ride, Veer and his group arrived at the heart of the forest. The giant crab placed them onto what appeared to be an altar. Surrounded by water, massive fish comparable in size to the crab itself jumped in and out, making the area appear extremely dangerous. Looking around, Veer found the scenery familiar. This was the altar from the original story. That made things simple. All he needed to do was shout, "Tour guides! Do your job!" Then he could head straight for God's shrine. Time to take down Enel. But first, he had to ensure the safety of the Going Merry. And the threat? Those fish, of course. First, he had to deal with these hungry flying fish eyeing them menacingly. The others on the ship were all terrified. The 2 Skypian guides were particularly dumbfounded. How did they suddenly become sacrifices? Wasn't everything going smoothly? They had just warned Veer about how dangerous this place was, and he had seemed to take their advice seriously by choosing to head to Angel Island instead. They thought being his guides wouldn't be too difficult. But now, what was happening? How did they suddenly become offerings for sacrifice? This was bad. There were only a few of them here. Coming in was basically a death sentence. Just look at those fish. They were impossible for normal people to handle. Would they just have to wait here until they died? Chopper and Robin also looked worried. Those fish clearly weren't weak opponents. Being trapped in such a dangerous place out of nowhere, if Veer weren't here, they wouldn't have known what to do. Chopper was about to ask Veer what they should do next. But before he could speak, Veer suddenly leaped off the ship and into the white sea below. This shocked everyone on board. What is he doing? Does he really think he can take on all those flying fish alone? Raki exclaimed in disbelief. The group quickly rushed to the railing to look down. But all they could see was the churning water. Nothing else. He's such an idiot. With his strength, we could have come up with a plan to escape. But no, he just had to jump down and throw his life away. Now we're truly doomed. Raki, seeing the chaos below, was convinced Veer was as good as dead. Fighting alone against so many powerful sea creatures in the water? That was basically a death sentence. Hearing this, Chopper, who was already anxious, became even more panicked. He couldn't wait anymore. Big Bro is in danger. No. I have to save him. Determined, he prepared to jump in. But Robin quickly held him back. He struggled several times, but Robin's multiple arms kept him firmly in place. The white sea was still the sea. A devil fruit user couldn't just jump in. Let me go, Robin. I have to save Big Bro. Chopper yelled, struggling against her grip. But with his current strength, there was no escaping Robin's hold. Just as Chopper was about to eat a rumble ball to increase his strength and break free, a figure suddenly leaped out of the water, landing steadily on the ship's railing. Seeing the scene before him, and Chopper holding a rumble ball ready to eat, Veer instantly understood what had happened. Waving a hand, he gestured for Robin to let Chopper go. Veer walked over and picked Chopper up with one hand. Taking the rumble ball from his hoof, he placed it back in Chopper's pocket. "What? You really think your big bro can't even handle a few fish?" Veer said, playfully patting Chopper's head. It was then that Ricky noticed the water below had turned red with blood. Countless massive fish, dozens of meters long, floated belly up on the surface. Judging by the scene, they had been alive just moments ago. SSSSS. What just happened? Less than a minute, no, not even a full minute. And every single one of those terrifying flying fish had been taken out. These creatures were the kind they would usually avoid at all costs. And here he had wiped out an entire school of them in mere seconds. This guy. His strength was completely unnatural. Scratch that, it was outright monstrous. Chopper, seeing Veer completely unharmed, finally breathed a sigh of relief. "I thought," he mumbled, still worried Veer might scold him. Veer put him down and looked him in the eyes seriously. "From now on, no matter what danger I'm in, don't ever come to help me." Though his words were strict, his tone was gentle. "If even I can't handle it, what good would you be? Don't worry about anything else. Just hurry back to your hometown, Drum Kingdom." "Got it." Chopper was confused but nodded. Would he actually listen? That remained to be seen. Bang! Suddenly, Veer smacked Chopper hard on the head. "Ow!" Chopper yelped, clutching his head. "You're a devil fruit user, and you still wanted to jump in the water. I'll let this slide once. If there's a next time, I'll punch you first, then heal you." Chopper shuddered. The pain vanished instantly. Only Veer's terrifying words remained in his mind. "Yes. Understood, big bro." Chopper instinctively saluted. Veer nodded in satisfaction. "All right, next stop the God's Shrine. Tour guides, time to work." He grabbed a nearby vine and swung toward the land ahead. The two guides turned pale. Did he just say God's Shrine? Where did he even hear about that? Forget that, was he insane? That place was home to an untouchable monster. Chapter 59, 2-on-1 is not allowed. It was because of that so-called god living there that they had never been able to reclaim their land. And now, this guy was heading straight for the god's shrine. What was he planning to do? Was he trying to experience what it felt like to ascend to heaven? While they were still processing this, Chopper and Robin had already followed Veer and swung across. Now, only the two of them remained on the ship. Veer quietly observed them from below, contemplating how he should treat the two who had been beaten half to death by him. The moment Raki saw the malicious glint in Veer's eyes, her mind cleared up instantly. To hell with Enel. To hell with gods. Somehow, none of that seemed as terrifying as Veer's gaze. Screw it. Raki didn't hesitate and immediately followed. Seeing that even the big sister figure had gone, Kamakiri had no choice but to follow suit to avoid a beating. Veer shook his head and muttered, "What a pity, what a pity." Hearing this, Robin chuckled lightly. And so, under their guide's lead, they made their way toward the back of the island. Meanwhile, on the other side, Luffy and his crew, with the help of the angelic girl, had set off on their journey to rescue Veer. They were currently riding a larger waver, heading towards the forest where Veer and the others had disappeared. Not long after they entered the forest, a large group of warriors dressed similarly to Raki and her people began advancing from another direction, heading deeper into the woods. At the forefront, Whipper's face was filled with fury. Far away, in the god's shrine, Enel lounged on a sofa, one leg crossed over the other, watching his priests with a relaxed expression. Right now, including us, there are 82 people in this holy land, but in 3 hours, only 5 will remain. Go forth. Kill to your heart's content. Make sure you are among the final 5. The moment Enel finished speaking, cheers erupted from below. A large group of priests rushed out, leaving only Enel seated there, his face adorned with a thick, amused smile. Ha ha ha! The game has begun. Meanwhile, Veer's group had already traveled several kilometers. Although the journey had been a bit bumpy, they had yet to encounter any real danger. Which was odd. Where were the priests? Where had they all gone? Shouldn't they at least be trying to stop them? Veer wasn't one to seek trouble, and he had hoped their journey would be smooth, but this was too unusual. Just as he was pondering this, a large, rotund man blocked their path. Veer's expression brightened finally, the divine warriors had arrived. This guy was Robin's opponent in the original story, a brute with immense strength. So they weren't absent, just a little slow. No problem, as long as they showed up. But just when he thought it was only one enemy, two more figures emerged behind the fat man. No, not just two. There was also a dog. At first, Raki didn't think much of it when it was just the big guy. But upon seeing the other two figures, her expression grew serious. Kamakiri quickly spoke up. Commander of the Divine Soldiers, Yama. That fat man has immense strength, and the row on his chest contains extremely powerful impact dials. Ordeal of Swamp, Gitetsu. He can create swamps and launch them at his enemies, and he's highly skilled with cloud dials. And the last one. His slashes are unmatched. His iron trial still has a survival rate of 0. When mentioning Kamakiri's tone was grave. With him here, things were truly looking grim. That dog was his pet. And it was strong too. Hearing this briefing, Veer furrowed his brows in thought. Seeing Veer's serious expression, Raki and Kamakiri felt their hearts sink. If even he had no solution, then they were doomed. But Veer was actually troubled by something else. How many should he fight? He had finally encountered some opponents, but if he defeated them all, wouldn't Robin and Chopper get nothing out of this? That wouldn't do. They were in a hurry, but not that much of a hurry. He'd take care of the strongest one and leave the rest to them. Having made up his mind, Veer spoke up, I'll take the strongest one. Robin, you handle the fat guy. Chopper, you take the other one. You too. That dog is yours. Then, he mumbled under his breath, all they can handle is a dog. This time, Raki and Kamakiri heard him. Although they were furious, they remained silent. Fighting a dog wasn't difficult for them. If they talked back, he might just make them fight instead. Right now, they were counting on him, so they had to endure it. With the assignments made, the strongest among the three, finally spoke. Have you chosen? I must admit, you are quite brave to pick me as your opponent. However, bravery comes at a price. Are you ready to face judgment, brat? His tone was mocking, and his eyes held nothing but contempt for Veer, as if the young man before him wasn't even worth his notice. But his attitude made Chopper's face darken as he charged at Gitetsu. Without a second thought, Chopper abandoned Gitetsu and lunged straight at swinging his fist at him. Merely smiled, casually raising his sword. Then, to everyone's shock, the blade swiftly transformed into a shield, blocking Chopper's punch with ease, without even a ripple of movement. Sword was crafted from iron clouds, combining the weight of clouds with the hardness of iron. It could freely change shape, extend, or retract. Furious, Chopper immediately engaged in battle. He couldn't tolerate anyone looking down on his big brother. But without his rumble ball, he was completely outmatched. Seeing this, Veer chuckled and shook his head. This kid. Fine. If Chopper wanted to fight, then he could have it. This would be a good test to see if the first version of the rumble ball was strong enough. With Veer here, how could anything happen to him? The other battles began almost simultaneously. Seeing Chopper switch targets, Gitetsu felt insulted. With a burst of gas from his feet, he shot forward, reaching Chopper's back in an instant and throwing a punch. Chopper sensed it and jumped sideways. But suddenly, Gitetsu's punch accelerated. What should have been a successful dodge turned into a direct hit. At the same time, an elongated sword blade was coming straight for him from the front. If this attack landed, he'd be heavily injured before he even had a chance to use his medicine. But just then, the extended sword suddenly snapped in half as if something had smashed it apart. Meanwhile, in front of the incoming punch, a hand appeared out of nowhere. The powerful punch landed on the hand but failed to move it an inch. Both attackers were stunned, staring at the figure that had suddenly appeared. With a cold expression, Veer spoke calmly. I never said you could gang up on him. Chapter 60, MVP Chopper. The two of them had already noticed that something felt off. How did this guy suddenly appear here? They hadn't seen anything at all. Then, as soon as Veer finished speaking, Gitetsu was sent flying. And much faster than when he arrived. Loud booms echoed through the air. In the distance, massive trees each with a diameter of over 10 meters collapsed one after another. The thunderous noise immediately drew everyone's attention. Everyone momentarily stopped. When they finally saw what had happened, they were all dumbfounded. What kind of power was this? Gidetsu was not weak, yet whether he could even survive that attack was uncertain. The sight of those enormous trees crashing down and the tremors shaking the ground left them in shock. He actually crashed through so many? Is this for real? On the other side, Ohm sensed it even more clearly than the others. His supposedly indestructible iron cloud sword had suddenly shattered before he even realized what had happened. There was no doubt about who did it. There were only so many people here. And considering Gidetsu's current miserable state, Ohm realized just how dangerous Veer was. This guy's strength, seems like he can crush us all. Go for it, Chopper. Take this guy down. Veer called out to Chopper before rushing toward where Gidetsu had disappeared. That guy was his opponent. This battlefield belonged to Chopper. All Veer needed to do was watch from the sidelines and make sure nothing happened to him. Everything else was up to him. Encouraged by Veer, Chopper nodded seriously. He couldn't always rely on his master for protection. One day, when his master got old, he would have to take care of him in return. He had to get stronger. He couldn't let his master down. With that thought, Chopper didn't hesitate any longer. He reached into the pocket of the pants Veer had made for him and pulled out a green pill. It was the first improved version of the rumble ball that his master had created. He tossed it into his mouth. As soon as he swallowed it, his entire reindeer body became noticeably more solid. His muscles became firmer. Feeling his strength increase by more than half, Chopper couldn't help but marvel at the power of the pill, even though he had tested it many times. This was his master's strength, his master's medical skills. This was the confidence his master had given him. Jumping point. Jumping point allowed Chopper in his reindeer form to move even faster. The moment he activated it, his speed skyrocketed as he charged toward Ohm. Although Ohm's sword had been broken in half, it didn't actually affect him much. He hadn't taken Chopper seriously before, but seeing Chopper's sudden burst of speed, his expression became noticeably grim. Meanwhile, Veer, who was leaning against a tree with the unconscious Gidetsu in hand, was quite satisfied with the result. Almost double the speed. Not bad. As he neared, Chopper leaped into the air, aiming to attack Ohm from above to avoid his shield. But Ohm's mantra had already predicted this move, and his shield was raised above his head in advance. Arm point. Arm point was a form that purely increased Chopper's strength. With a loud shout, Chopper's body transformed back into the muscular humanoid form. This time, his arms were even thicker than before. Boom! The moment they clashed, the ground cracked beneath them. The sheer force from Chopper's attack made it hard for Ohm to withstand. His shield, after a brief resistance, could no longer hold. It slammed into his own chest. Although he was shocked by the reindeer's sudden power surge, Ohm quickly reacted. The moment Chopper's strength waned, the shield transformed into a long snake-like sword, thrusting straight toward Chopper's eye. This thrust could pierce steel if it hit, the battle would be over. Chopper, still in mid-air, couldn't dodge. Guard point. Guard point enhanced Chopper's defense. His fur suddenly grew thicker, and his body size increased slightly. The sword aimed at his eye only managed to pierce his chest. But the strike Ohm had pinned all his hopes on stopped after penetrating just 3 centimeters into Chopper's chest. What? Impossible. Ohm was stunned by how ineffective his attack was. In that brief moment of shock, Chopper's horns grew to an enormous size. Hooking onto Ohm's sword, he violently flipped it away. The sudden maneuver, combined with Chopper's immense strength, caused Ohm to lose his grip on his sword. Now weaponless, Ohm was completely vulnerable. Heavy point. Cross horn. Heavy point was Chopper's strongest offensive form. In this humanoid reindeer form, his arms became incredibly thick. In this state, Chopper could unleash many high-damage attacks. With both hooves pressed together, he slammed them fiercely into Ohm's chest. Instantly, a massive shockwave erupted from Ohm's back, piercing straight through the air behind him. Blood sprayed as Ohm lost consciousness. With Ohm's defeat, Chopper secured his first victory. A pure, joyful smile spread across his goofy face. Heh. Leaning against the tree, Veer glanced at the massive cross-shaped hole left in the tree beside his head and shook his head helplessly. Why does it feel like that attack was aimed at me? Just a little off, and it would have landed on my head. Putting that aside, Chopper's growth was impressive. His synchronization with the first version of the improved Rumble Ball was excellent. Looks like he hasn't been slacking off. Not bad. Not bad at all. Shortly after, the other two battles also concluded. Robin, though exhausted, hadn't sustained any injuries. Raki and the others, however, weren't so lucky. Raki was already injured, and Kamakiri wasn't fully used to his new weapon. As a result, the two of them got absolutely pummeled by a dog. If Veer hadn't stepped in, they might have actually lost to that mutt. This made Veer re-evaluate them. Looks like even handling a dog is too much for them. At the moment, both of them were covered in bruises. Especially Raki, her clothes were torn to shreds by the dog. She looked absolutely miserable. Seeing the defeated dog on the ground, the two of them finally sighed in relief. How's the situation on their side? Do they need help? Raki was still worried about Chopper's fight. After all, Chopper's opponent was the strongest. Earlier, Chopper had been completely on the defensive, with no hope of winning. What? Help with what? It's already over. We've been waiting for you two for a while now. Veer said, exasperated. But the two of them didn't believe him. Chopper had just been getting beaten down with no chance of winning, and now you're telling us it ended quickly? What kind of joke is this? However, when they saw Om lying on the ground, their disbelief turned into shock. They were utterly stunned. Looking at the now small-sized Chopper munching on food, their expressions were priceless. What the hell happened? Chopper took down Om? This was even harder to believe than the idea of Veer being a good doctor. Isn't Chopper just a pet? Since when could he fight? And at such a high level too. This doesn't make any sense. The power gap was obvious at the start of the fight. How did it suddenly? Chopper, how did you do it? They asked in disbelief. Chopper proudly responded, because my master gave me a special pill. It instantly boosts my strength. What? A pill? Instant strength boost? Hold on. This is getting crazy. Something like that actually exists? And it was man-made? They turned to look at Veer in shock. In just a few hours, their understanding of the world had been shattered multiple times. Veer was way too extraordinary.
Thanks for listening.